Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Thomas Blackthorne, and I've been keeping this secret for 34 years. Back in 1961, I was just 29 years old, working as a forest ranger in the Cherokee National Forest. People always think being a ranger is about helping lost hikers and putting out campfires. They don't know about the other things we sometimes find out there in the deep woods. I had a good life then. Sarah, my wife, was pregnant with our second child. Our daughter Emma was only 3, always asking when Daddy would come home from the forest. I loved my job, walking those mountain trails, checking on the timber crews, making sure the old growth sections stayed protected. The Cherokee Forest was my home, and I thought I knew every shadow between those ancient trees. That was before the shadow walker found us. It started in June, right around the summer solstice. I remember because the days were getting longer, but somehow the shadows seemed darker. The timber crew working Section 12 had been radio silent for 2 days. That wasn't like Bill Morrison's crew. They checked in every morning at 8 sharp, rain or shine. My supervisor, Frank Garrett, called me into his office that Tuesday morning. Frank was a good man, been a ranger longer than anyone else in Tennessee. His hands were shaking when he handed me the radio. "Tom, I need you to hike up to Section 12. Check on Morrison's crew. Something's not right." The worry in his voice made my stomach tight. Frank had seen everything these mountains could throw at a man. If he was scared, I should be too. I packed my gear, radio, first aid kit, flare gun, and my grandfather's old hunting rifle. Sarah always said I was too careful, but growing up Cherokee, my grandmother had taught me that the forest holds more than just animals. Some things in the deep woods don't like to be disturbed. The hike to Section 12 took 3 hours. The morning was beautiful. Birds singing, sunlight filtering through the canopy, wildflowers blooming along the old deer paths. But as I got deeper into the timber area, something felt wrong. The birds stopped singing first. Then I noticed the trees. 12 massive pines had been cut down, but they weren't stacked for transport. They were arranged in a perfect circle, their tops pointing inward like the spokes of a giant wheel. In 30 years of working these forests, I'd never seen loggers arrange trees like that. It looked almost like some kind of ritual. "Hello?" I called out. "Bill, anyone out here?" My voice echoed strangely, like the trees were swallowing the sound. That's when I saw the first footprint. It was pressed deep into the mud, near the tree circle, bigger than any human foot I'd ever seen, maybe 18 inches long with 5 thick toes that ended in what looked like claw marks. But the strangest thing was how the print seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, like it wasn't quite solid. I knelt down and took a photo with my camera, then made a plaster cast like they taught us in training. While the plaster was setting, I followed the trail of prints into the forest. They led deeper into the mountains, toward an area we called Shadow Valley, because the canyon walls blocked out most of the sunlight. That's where I found Bill Morrison's logging truck, empty and covered in scratches. Deep gouges ran along both sides like something with claws the size of railroad spikes had tried to tear it open. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, and there was blood on the driver's seat. But no Bill, no crew, just their lunchboxes sitting on a fallen log, sandwiches still wrapped, coffee still warm in their thermoses. I radioed Frank immediately. "I found their truck. No sign of the crew. Something attacked it. The damage. Frank, I've never seen and anything like this." Static crackled over the radio for a long moment. Then Frank's voice came back, tight and scared. "Tom, get out of there, now. Don't investigate further. Just mark the location and come back." I was about to respond when I heard it. A sound like wind moving through dry leaves, except there was no wind. The sound was coming from the shadows between the trees, growing louder, getting closer. And that's when I saw it move. The shadow detached itself from the base of an old oak tree and stood up. I'm not talking about a person hiding in the shadows. I mean the shadow itself. The dark shape that should have stayed flat on the ground rose up like black water flowing upward. It towered at least 15 feet tall, roughly human-shaped but wrong in every way that mattered. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the radio. "Frank, there's something here, something big." "Tom, what are you seeing?" I couldn't answer. The shadow thing was moving toward me, not walking exactly, but flowing between the trees like dark smoke. Where it passed, the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. The normal forest sounds, insects, wind in the leaves, distant bird calls, went completely silent. It stopped about 20 feet away, and I felt it watching me even though it had no visible eyes. The shape rippled and shifted, sometimes looking almost human, other times like a massive wolf standing on its hind legs. But always shadow, always wrong. Then it spoke, not with a voice, but directly into my head. "You should not have come here, Ranger Man." I grabbed my rifle and fired 3 shots center mass. The bullets passed right through it like it was made of smoke, hitting the tree behind with sharp cracks. The shadow thing made a sound like laughter, wet and cold and hungry. Iron cannot hurt what casts no shadow of its own. I ran. I've never been ashamed of running from a fight, and I'm not starting now. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't natural. My Cherokee grandmother used to tell stories about creatures that lived between the world of light and the world of spirits. I'd thought they were just stories. Behind me I could hear trees crashing down, not the clean cuts of a chainsaw, but the sound of massive trunks being snapped like twigs. The shadow was following me, and it was angry. I made it back to Section 12 in half the time it had taken me to hike in. My truck was parked at the old logging road, and I'd never been so happy to see that beat-up Ford in my life. I jumped in, turned the key, and nothing. The engine was completely dead. No click, no turnover, nothing. I tried again and again while looking in my mirrors for any sign of the shadow thing. The forest behind me looked normal. Sunlight, green leaves, peaceful as a postcard. Then my radio crackled to life. "Tom? Tom, are you there? We've got military vehicles coming up the mountain road. Federal plates. They're asking about you." Military? I'd only been gone 4 hours. How did the military even know about this? I tried to respond, but the radio was dead too, just like the truck. I popped the hood and checked the engine. Everything looked normal, but it was like something had drained all the electrical power. That's when I noticed the photographs I'd taken earlier were scattered on the ground next to my truck. I picked them up, and my blood went cold. The photos of the footprint were completely black, like I'd opened the camera in bright light. But around the edges, I could just make out normal forest details. Whatever I'd photographed, it didn't want to be recorded. I heard vehicles coming up the mountain road, big diesel engines, multiple trucks. Through the trees, I could see olive green canvas covers and men in military uniforms. They moved with the kind of precision that meant this wasn't their first time dealing with something like this. A woman in a lab coat stepped out of the lead vehicle. She was young, maybe early 30s, with blonde hair pulled back and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Behind her came a man in an Army colonel's uniform, tall and thin with gray at his temples. "Ranger Blackthorn?" The woman approached with her hand extended. "I'm Dr. Helen Kane, Department of Defense Research Division. This is Colonel Morrison. We understand you've encountered something unusual." I stared at them. "How did you know to come here? I only called this in an hour ago." The colonel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We've been monitoring unusual activity in this area for several weeks. The missing logging crew was just the latest incident." "Latest incident? What other incidents?" Dr. Kane opened a thick file folder. 3 hunting parties have disappeared in this area over the past month. 2 hikers found dead with injuries that don't match any known animal attack patterns. And yesterday, a family camping at Devil's Creek reported seeing a moving shadow that chased them back to their car. She showed me photographs that made my stomach turn. The hunters had been torn apart. but not like a bear or mountain lion would do it. These looked like the work of something intelligent, something that enjoyed causing fear. We believe you've encountered what our research division calls an unknown biological entity, Dr. Kane continued, possibly a surviving member of a species previously thought to be mythological. Colonel Morrison stepped forward. Ranger Blackthorn, I'm going to be direct. We need your help. You know these woods better than anyone, and you've seen the entity and survived. That makes you valuable. I need to report back to my supervisor. My family is expecting me home tonight. The colonel's expression hardened. I'm afraid that's not possible. This area is now under federal jurisdiction for reasons of national security. Your supervisor has been informed that you're assisting with a classified operation. My hands clenched into fists. You can't just... We can, and we are. He handed me a document with official seals and signatures. You're now a temporary consultant for Project Shadowwalker. Dr. Kane will explain what we need from you. Dr. Kane led me to a mobile laboratory they'd set up in the back of one of their trucks. Inside were computers, scientific equipment, and dozens of photographs pinned to a corkboard. Photos of massive footprints, damaged trees, and dark shapes that looked like they'd been taken in bad lighting. We've been tracking this creature for 3 months, she explained. It seems to be territorial, claiming an area of roughly 50 square miles centered on Shadow Valley. It only hunts during new moon periods, and it appears to have some kind of dimensional properties. Dimensional? She pointed to a series of photographs taken in sequence. They showed a large shadow moving across a clearing, but in the third photo, the shadow simply vanished. Not because it moved out of frame, but because it seemed to sink into the ground like water. We think it can travel through shadows themselves, using them as a kind of highway. That would explain how it can appear and disappear so quickly, and why victims are found miles apart with no trail between attack sites. I studied the photos, thinking about what I'd seen. The thing I encountered, it spoke to me, in my head. Dr. Kane's eyes lit up. Telepathic communication? That fits with reports from other survivors. It seems to enjoy psychological warfare as much as physical attacks. Colonel Morrison joined us in the lab. Which brings us to why you're here, Ranger. We need to capture this creature alive. Capture it? Are you insane? That thing killed 12 men. 12 men who weren't prepared for what they were facing, the colonel replied. We have equipment, weapons, and most importantly, we have knowledge. This entity represents a potential breakthrough in biological warfare. Imagine soldiers who could travel through shadows, who could appear behind enemy lines without warning. The casual way he talked about weaponizing the creature that had killed Bill Morrison and his crew made me sick. These weren't scientists trying to understand something new. They were military researchers looking for the next way to kill people. But I was trapped. They had the legal authority, and more importantly, they had guns. What exactly do you need me to do? Dr. Kane smiled. Guide us to its territory. Help us understand its behavior patterns. And if necessary, serve as bait. We spent the next 2 days setting up a base camp at the edge of Shadow Valley. The military brought in enough equipment to supply a small army. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, floodlights, and weapons I didn't recognize. Dr. Kane's team set up monitoring stations throughout the forest, trying to track the creature's movements. I led them to every location where I'd found evidence. The tree circle, the damaged truck, the impossible footprints. Dr. Kane documented everything with scientific precision, taking measurements and samples like she was studying a new species of butterfly instead of something that had already killed 15 people. The colonel's men were different. They moved through the forest like hunters, always watching the shadows, always ready for a fight. Their leader was a sergeant named Martinez, a tough man from Texas who'd served 3 tours in Korea. He was the only one who seemed to understand what we were really dealing with. Sir, he told Colonel Morrison on our second day, my men are getting spooked. Last night, Rodriguez swore he saw something moving in his tent shadow. And Williams won't sleep without all the lights on. Psychological warfare, the colonel replied dismissively. The creature is trying to break our morale. We won't let it. But I could see the fear in their eyes. These were trained soldiers, Men who'd faced human enemies in combat. They weren't prepared for something that could step out of their own shadows. That night, it struck again, when I was in my sleeping bag near the main camp when screaming woke me up. Not the scream of someone who was hurt, the scream of someone who was absolutely terrified. I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward the sound. It was coming from Sensor Station 3 about half a mile into the valley. Through the trees, I could see flashlight beams dancing wildly as soldiers shouted orders and gunfire erupted. By the time I reached the station, it was over. Private Chen, Dr. Kane's research assistant, was gone. The monitoring equipment was destroyed, smashed into pieces and scattered across a 100-yard area. But worst of all were the trees around the station. Massive pines and oaks that had been twisted into impossible shapes, their trunks bent and knotted like someone had braided them together while they were still living. And carved into the largest oak, 8 feet off the ground, was a message: "Leave now or feed the shadows." "Intelligent communication," Dr. Kane said, photographing the carving. "It understands our language and our purpose here. Fascinating." "Fascinating?" Sergeant Martinez stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "That thing just killed one of your people and you think it's fascinating?" "From a scientific perspective." "Enough!" Colonel Morrison's voice cut through their argument. "We're not backing down. If anything, this proves the creature can be reasoned with. That makes capture more likely." I wanted to hit him. Chen had been a good kid, barely 22 years old, excited about his first field assignment. Now he was dead because these people couldn't understand that some things shouldn't be captured and studied. The next morning, we found what was left of Chen. His body parts were arranged in a neat line stretching from our camp to Shadow Valley. First his boots, then pieces of his uniform, then parts I don't want to describe. Each piece was placed exactly 100 yards from the next, creating a trail that led straight into the creature's territory. It was a message, and we all understood it perfectly. This is what happens when you don't listen. Dr. Kane examined each piece with scientific detachment, taking notes and photographs. The precision of the placement suggests high intelligence. And look at these cuts. Surgical precision, not the random tearing you'd expect from an animal attack. That afternoon, 3 more soldiers asked to be transferred back to base. Colonel Morrison refused. No one leaves until the mission is complete. That's an order. By the 4th day, half the team was showing signs of what Dr. Kane called shadow syndrome, paranoid behavior, fear of darkness, and reports of seeing movement in their peripheral vision. 2 soldiers had stopped sleeping entirely. I tried reasoning with the colonel. "Sir, this thing is picking us off one by one. It's not afraid of us. It's playing with us. We need to evacuate and rethink our approach." "Absolutely not. We're close to a breakthrough. Dr. Kane believes she's identified the creature's hunting patterns." Dr. Kane showed me her research charts. "It only attacks during certain lunar phases and always in areas with dense tree cover. If we can predict where it will appear next, we can be ready with containment equipment." "Containment equipment?" She led me to a new truck that had arrived that morning. Inside were what looked like oversized animal cages, but made from some kind of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Experimental shadow-dampening alloy. Theoretically, it should be able to contain an entity that exists partially in shadow space. I stared at the cages. "You want to trap it in there?" "For study, yes. Think of what we could learn. New physics, new biology, possibly even new applications for military technology." That night, the creature came for Dr. Kane. I was on watch duty when I heard her scream from inside her research tent. I ran toward the sound, but the shadow was already there, flowing around the tent like black water, completely surrounding it. Through the canvas, I could see Dr. Kane's silhouette struggling against something much larger. She was trying to use some kind of electronic device, probably one of her experimental weapons, but the shadow thing grabbed her arm and the device went flying. I aimed my rifle at the creature, but stopped. Any bullet that missed would go straight through the tent into Dr. Kane. Instead, I grabbed one of the portable floodlights and aimed it at the tent. The light hit the shadow, and it recoiled like I'd thrown acid on it. The creature released Dr. Kane and flowed backward, away from the bright illumination. For just a moment, in the harsh electric light, I saw its true form. Not entirely shadow, but something solid underneath, like a massive humanoid figure wearing darkness as a cloak. Dr. Kane stumbled out of the tent, her lab coat torn and her face white with terror. In her hand, she clutched a small recording device. "It spoke to me," she whispered. "It told me things. Things about what it wants to do to all of us." Colonel Morrison grabbed the recorder. "What did it say?" Dr. Kane's hands were shaking as she rewound the tape. When she pressed play, we heard her terrified voice, then something else. A sound like wind mixed with whispers, but forming words. "You study shadows, bright woman. Soon you will become one. Feed me your fear, feed me your flesh, and I will show you the darkness between stars." The colonel smiled. "Perfect. We have proof of intelligence, proof of communication ability. This creature will revolutionize warfare." I couldn't take it anymore. 15 people are dead. It's not a weapon, it's a predator, and we're the prey. "That's enough, Ranger." The colonel's voice was ice cold. "You're either with this mission, or you're relieved of duty. Which is it?" I looked around at the remaining team members. 6 soldiers who were terrified out of their minds. Dr. Kane, who was clearly traumatized but still obsessed with her research, and a colonel who saw dead Americans as acceptable losses in his quest for a new weapon. "I'm with the mission," I lied. Because I'd made a decision. If these people wouldn't listen to reason, I'd have to stop them another way. That night, I did something I've regretted every day since. I snuck out of camp and hiked to the nearest Cherokee community, a small settlement about 10 miles east where my grandmother's sister, Mary Sequoia, still lived. Mary was 93 years old, one of the last people who remembered the old stories from before the white settlers changed everything. If anyone knew how to deal with the shadow walker, it would be her. I found her sitting on her porch, like she'd been waiting for me. "Tommy Blackthorn," she said in Cherokee. "I've been expecting you. The shadows have been restless for days." I told her everything. The dead loggers, the military team, the creature that could travel through shadows. She listened without interrupting, nodding like nothing I said surprised her. "The shadow walker," she finally said. "My grandmother saw one during the Trail of Tears. It followed our people west, feeding on the fear and death of the forced march. We thought it died when we performed the binding ceremony, but some things are too old to truly die. They just sleep until they're awakened again." Mary went into her house and returned with a leather pouch filled with what looked like black sand. "Sacred ash from fires that burned before your people came to this land. It can hurt the shadow walker, make it solid enough to kill. Why are you helping me?" Her ancient eyes fixed on mine. "Because your people have no idea what they're playing with. They want to capture it, study it, use it as a weapon. But the shadow walker doesn't serve anyone. It only feeds, and once it's fed enough, it will call others." Others? The thought of more creatures like this one made my blood freeze. How many others? As many as there are shadows in the world. I took the pouch of sacred ash and started back toward camp, but Mary called after me. "Tommy, the binding ceremony requires a life. Someone has to stay behind to complete it. Someone has to choose to become the guardian, keeping the creature locked in this place until the end of time." I nodded, understanding what she meant. Someone would have to die to stop this thing. I made it back to camp just before dawn, but something was wrong. The guards were gone from their posts, and several tents had been torn open from the inside. I found Colonel Morrison in his command tent, sitting at his field desk with a radio microphone in his hand. "Sir, what's the situation?" He looked up at me, and I saw immediately that something had changed. His eyes were completely black, like pools of shadow, and when he smiled, his teeth looked sharp. "The situation, Ranger Blackthorn, is under control. Dr. Kane has made remarkable progress in her communication experiments." "Where is Dr. Kane?" "Right here," came her voice from behind me. I turned and saw her emerging from the shadows at the back of the tent. But like the colonel, her eyes had gone black, and her skin had taken on a grayish tint, like she was becoming Shadow herself. "The Shadow Walker has been very educational," she said, her voice sounding hollow and distant. "It's shown us things about the nature of reality that our science never imagined. Dark matter, parallel dimensions, the spaces between atoms where consciousness can exist without flesh." The radio crackled to life, and I heard a voice I didn't recognize. "Shadow Walker Base, this is Pentagon Command. Dr. Kane's preliminary reports are extremely promising. We're sending additional research teams to expedite the project. More teams, more people for this thing to kill or corrupt." I keyed the radio myself. "Pentagon Command, this is Ranger Blackthorn. The situation here has gone beyond control. The entity has compromised the research team. Request immediate evacuation and nuclear sterilization of the area." Silence. Then, "Ranger Blackthorn, you are relieved of duty and ordered to surrender to Colonel Morrison immediately." The colonel stood up, and I realized he was taller than before, at least 7 feet, with arms that stretched too long and fingers that ended in claws. "You really shouldn't have interfered, Tom," he said, his voice now carrying the same whisper quality I'd heard from the creature. "We were having such productive discussions about military applications." Dr. Kane moved to block the tent entrance. "The Shadow Walker has agreed to serve our country's interests. All it asks in return is feeding rights on enemy populations. Imagine, we could eliminate entire cities without ever firing a shot." They were both completely insane, or possessed, or transformed into something that wasn't human anymore. I reached into my pocket and grabbed a handful of Mary's sacred ash. "This stops now." I threw the ash at Dr. Kane first. Where it hit her, she screamed, and dark smoke poured from her skin like she was burning from the inside. She collapsed, writhing on the ground as the shadow infection was torn away from her. Colonel Morrison lunged at me with inhuman speed, but I managed to dump the rest of the ash over his head. He fell backward, making a sound like wind through a graveyard, and I could see the real man underneath as the shadow influence was burned away. But the damage was done. Through the tent flap, I could see the Shadow Walker itself approaching camp, not hiding anymore, not playing games. It flowed between the trees like a black river, 15 feet tall and radiating cold that froze my breath. "You have chosen poorly, Ranger Man. Now you will watch your loved ones feed my hunger." And suddenly I could see them, Sarah and Emma, asleep in our house 40 miles away. But in the vision the creature showed me, they weren't alone. Shadow shapes moved through our hokus. Me, flowing under doors and through windows, reaching for my family with claws like midnight. "No!" I grabbed every flare I could find and ran outside. The remaining soldiers were scattered around the camp, some dead, others transformed like the colonel had been. The creature towered over everything, no longer hiding its true nature. It was ancient and hungry and absolutely evil. I fired every flare straight up into the air, turning the night into day with red emergency light. The Shadow Walker recoiled from the brightness, becoming more solid, more vulnerable. Then I started setting fires. I used gasoline from the generators, lighter fluid from the camp stoves, anything that would burn bright and hot. The creature screamed as flames spread through its territory, destroying the shadows it used for travel and refuge. "You cannot burn all the darkness in the world, little man. And when these flames die, I will find you. I will find your family. I will make their deaths last for days." "Maybe," I said, pulling out the last of Mary's sacred ash, "but I can make sure you never leave this valley." I began the binding ceremony the way Mary had taught me, spreading the ash in a perfect circle around the creature's position. With each handful I threw, the Shadow Walker became more solid, more trapped in our dimension. The circle was almost complete when I realized what I had to do to finish it. Mary had been right. The binding required a life. Someone had to stay inside the circle with the creature, holding it in place forever. Someone had to become the guardian. I thought about Sarah and Emma sleeping safely at home. I thought about all the other families who would be safe if this thing never escaped Shadow Valley. I stepped inside the circle and threw the last handful of ash. The Shadow Walker lunged at me with claws like razors, but the binding circle held. It was trapped, and so was I. We would stay here together until one of us died, and since it was already dead, that meant forever. But as the creature's claws reached my chest, automatic gunfire erupted from the tree line. Sergeant Martinez appeared with the few soldiers who'd remained human, pouring bullets into the now solid Shadow Walker. The creature screamed and dissolved into smoke that was sucked down into the ash circle like water down a drain. The binding was complete, but the Guardian was still needed. "Go!" I shouted at Martinez. "Get everyone out of here! Don't let them send more teams!" Martinez grabbed my arm. "Sir, we're not leaving you. You have to. Someone has to stay to maintain the binding, and I'm the only one who knows how." That was a lie. Mary could have maintained it, or any of her relatives who knew the old ways. But I was done with lying to myself about what needed to happen. I had led them here. I had helped them find the creature. 15 people were dead because of my choices. This was how I paid for that. They tried to change my mind, but in the end, Martinez understood. He was a good soldier. He knew about duty and sacrifice. He took the surviving team members and hiked out of Shadow Valley, leaving me alone with the ash circle and the trapped creature. For 3 days, I maintained the binding. I could feel the Shadow Walker testing the barriers, looking for weak spots, but the ceremony held. On the 4th day, military trucks arrived with a new research team. I tried to warn them off, but they had orders from Washington. The Shadow Walker project was too valuable to abandon, and I was just a local ranger who'd suffered trauma-induced hallucinations. They sedated me and took me back to civilization, where I spent 6 months in a military psychiatric facility being treated for combat stress, even though I'd never been in combat. When they finally released me, it was with a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and a warning that any further discussion of classified events would result in treason charges. I came home to find Sarah Epes and Emma gone. The official story was a car accident. A drunk driver hit them head-on while I was receiving treatment. But I knew better. The creature had kept its promise. Even trapped in Shadow Valley, it had found a way to hurt my family. I never remarried, never had more children. I moved to this cabin at the edge of the Cherokee forest and spent 34 years keeping watch, making sure the binding held. But it's failing now. Every year the barriers get a little weaker. Every new moon I can feel the Shadow Walker testing the edges of its prison. And lately I've been seeing things. Dark shapes moving between the trees. Shadows that fall the wrong way. Footprints that disappear when I look directly at them. It's calling others, just like Mary warned. They're coming to free their trapped brother, and when they do, the world is going to learn what real darkness looks like. The cancer is eating me from the inside now. I've got maybe 6 months left, and when I die, there won't be anyone left who knows how to maintain the binding. That's why I'm telling you this story. Not because I expect you to believe it. Hell, I wouldn't believe it if someone told it to me. But because someone needs to know the truth about what's sleeping in Shadow Valley. The government is still trying to capture it. Every few years, they send new teams with better equipment and bigger weapons, thinking they can succeed where others failed. They never learn. Sometimes on quiet nights when the wind is blowing from the mountains, I can hear it calling my name, promising revenge for all the years I've kept it trapped, promising that when it gets free, it will find everyone I ever cared about, everyone who ever helped me, everyone who might try to stop it again. The shadows are getting longer these days, and they're starting to move when there's no wind to move them. End of recording. Note found with Thomas Blackthorn's body, October 15, 1995. If you're reading this, I'm dead and the binding has failed. The Shadow Walker is free. Don't try to fight it. You can't win. Don't try to study it. You'll only make it stronger. Just run. Run as far and as fast as you can and pray it doesn't follow you home. Tell my story. Someone needs to remember what happened here. Someone needs to warn the world. The shadows are moving again. T. Blackthorn. P.S. Check the trees around Shadow Valley. If they're arranged in circles, it's already too late. My name is Lucas Grimwald, but everyone calls me Luke. I'm a ranger here in Monongahela National Forest, which is just a fancy way of saying I walk around in the woods making sure people don't get lost or hurt. I've only been doing this job for 6 months, but I thought I'd seen everything by now. I was wrong. It's February 1978, and West Virginia is getting hit by the worst blizzard anyone can remember. The snow is coming down so thick you can't see 10 feet in front of your face. I'm sitting in the ranger station drinking bad coffee and listening to the wind howl when the call comes in. Ranger station, this is Jim Nordstrom. We're lost. My family and we can't find the trail back. I grab the radio. Mr. Nordstrom, this is Ranger Grimwald. How many people are with you? 4. Me, my wife Sarah, and our 2 kids. Tommy's 12, Lisa's 9. Please, it's getting dark and we're freezing. I look outside at the white wall of snow. Every part of me wants to tell them to stay put until morning. But I hear the little girl crying in the background, and I remember why I took this job. After Vietnam, after all the death I saw there, I wanted to save people instead of watching them die. Okay, Mr. Nordstrom, tell me exactly where you are. He describes their location, near the old mining area about 5 miles north. I pack my gear, medical kit from my army days, flares, rope, extra batteries for the radio. My hands shake a little as I check my rifle. They always shake now, ever since I came back from the war. The doctors call it nerves. I call it remembering. The drive out takes forever. The roads are buried, and twice I almost slide off into a ditch. By the time I park and start hiking, it's almost dark. The snow is up to my knees in some places. Mr. Nordstrom, can you hear me? I call into the radio every few minutes. Nothing but static. The forest feels wrong tonight. Tom, I've been walking these trails for months, and I know how they're supposed to feel. But right now, everything is too quiet. The wind doesn't sound right. And the trees, I know this sounds crazy, but the trees look like they're leaning away from something, like they're scared. I find the first sign after about an hour of walking. It's a backpack dropped in the snow. Pink, with flowers on it. A kid's backpack. I pick it up and something dark and wet stains my glove. Blood. Fresh blood, still warm enough that it hasn't frozen yet. Nordstrom family, I yell. Can anyone hear me? The wind carries my voice away. I follow the blood trail, my heart pounding. The snow is all torn up here like there was a struggle. More blood. A lot more. Then I see the first body. Mrs. Nordstrom is lying face down in the snow. At first I think maybe she fell. Maybe she hit her head. But when I turn her over, I see that half of her is missing. Just gone. Eaten. I've seen dead bodies before. In Vietnam, I saw things that gave me nightmares for years. But this is different. This is worse. Because whatever did this wasn't trying to kill. It was trying to feed. I find the father next, then the boy. Same thing. Torn apart like they were food at a dinner table. The little girl, Lisa. I find her last. She's still holding a stuffed rabbit. I throw up in the snow. I can't help it. That's when I hear it. A sound like breathing, but wrong. Too deep, too hungry. Coming from the trees behind me. I spin around, my rifle up. Who's there? Nothing. Just wind and snow and darkness. But something is watching me. I can feel it the same way I could feel enemy soldiers watching from the jungle. That same cold certainty that you're being hunted. I grab my radio. Station, this is Grimwald. I've found the Nordstrom family. They're all dead. Something killed them. Something big. Static. Station, do you copy? More static. Then my radio dies completely. The batteries should have lasted for hours, but they're just gone, like something sucked the power right out of them. I look down at the tracks and the snow around the bodies. They're huge, bigger than any bear I've ever seen, but they're not bear tracks. They're shaped like human feet, but longer with claws, and they're leading away into the forest. Away from me. No, wait. I follow them with my flashlight, and I realize they make a circle. They go around the bodies, around me, and then they lead back into the trees behind me. Whatever made these tracks walked all the way around me while I was looking at the bodies. It was watching me the whole time. The breathing sound comes again, closer now. I swing my light toward it, and for just a second, I see something moving between the trees. Something tall and thin and wrong. I run. I've been running for maybe 20 minutes when I realize I'm lost. Everything looks the same in this blizzard. White ground, dark trees, white sky. My lungs are burning and my legs feel like rubber, but I keep going because I can hear it behind me. Not footsteps. Something worse. It's the sound of branches breaking, snow crunching, and that breathing. Always that breathing. "Help!" I scream. "Somebody help me!" Nobody answers. Nobody can. The nearest ranger station is 40 miles away, and in this storm, they can't send anyone, even if they knew I needed help. I'm alone out here with whatever killed the Nordstrom family. My flashlight is getting dimmer. I shake it, and it flickers back to full brightness for a second, then dies completely. Now I'm running blind through the dark, with just the white snow to guide me. I trip over something and go down hard. Pain shoots through my knee. I roll over gasping and I see what I tripped on. It's a hand, just a hand, torn off at the wrist, frozen in the snow. I scramble backward and hit a tree. My eyes are adjusting to the dark now, and I can see shapes in the snow all around me. More pieces. An arm here, part of a leg there. This must be an old kill sign. T, from before the Nordstroms. How long has this thing been hunting in my forest? Then I hear a voice. "Luke?" I freeze. That voice. I know that voice. "Luke, where are you? I'm scared." It's Jenny. Jenny Morrison, my girlfriend. She works as a naturalist at the park, teaching kids about plants and animals. We've been dating for 3 months, and I was going to ask her to marry me next week. "Jenny?" I call out. "Jenny, is that you?" "I'm cold, Luke. Please help me." I get up, limping on my hurt knee. "Where are you? Keep talking." "I'm here. I'm right here." Her voice is coming from behind a big cluster of pine trees. I push through the branches, and I see her standing in a small clearing. She's wearing her ranger jacket, but no hat, and her blonde hair is covered in snow. "Jenny, thank God. We need to get out of here. There's something..." I stop. Something's wrong. Jenny isn't moving right. She's just standing there, perfectly still, in the middle of a blizzard. Not shivering, not even blinking. "Come closer, Luke," she says. But her mouth doesn't move right when she talks. The words don't match her lips. "Jenny?" She smiles. Her teeth look too long. "Come closer." I take a step back. "You're not Jenny." The thing wearing Jenny's shape tilts its head. Then it opens its mouth wide, wider than any human mouth should open, and it screams. Not with Jenny's voice, with something else. Something ancient and hungry and full of hate. I shoot it. I don't even think about it. My rifle comes up and I pull the trigger 3 times. The shots are so loud they make my ears ring. The thing staggers backward. I see the bullets hit it. Chest, shoulder. Dark blood that looks black in the snow. But it doesn't fall down. It just looks at me with Jenny's face, blood running down its chin, and it laughs. Then it runs at me. I've never seen anything move that fast. 1 second it's 5 feet away. The next it's right in front of me. I see its hand, too long with claws like knives, reaching for my face. I drop and roll, and those claws whistle through the air where my head was. I come up running, and I don't look back. I can hear it behind me, laughing with Jenny's voice. "Luke, don't run! Luke, I love you!" I crash through the forest like a scared animal. Branches hit my face. Snow gets in my eyes. My hurt knee is screaming with every step. But I don't stop. I can't stop. I see a light ahead. A building. The old mining cabin. I remember it from my training. It's been abandoned for 20 years, but right now it looks like heaven. The door is locked. I slam into it with my shoulder, and pain explodes through my arm, but the door doesn't budge. Behind me, I hear it coming through the trees. "Luke, why are you running from me?" I shoot the lock. The wood splinters and the door swings open. I throw myself inside and slam it shut, then drag a heavy table in front of it. The cabin is dark and smells like old wood and rust. My flashlight is dead, but there's enough moonlight coming through the broken windows for me to see a little. Old mining equipment everywhere. A table with a lantern on it, shelves with cans of food and bottles. I find matches and light the lantern. Warm yellow light fills the cabin. Something hits the door so hard the whole building shakes. I hear that breathing again right outside. "Let me in, Luke! Go away!" I scream. "You're not Jenny! You're not her!" Silence. Then a different voice. A man's voice. Older. Rough. "Help me, please. It's eating me. It's eating me alive." Mr. Nordstrom's voice. "Please, God, help me." I put my hands over my ears, but I can still hear it. It cycles through voices now. Mrs. Nordstrom, the little boy, the girl. All of them begging me for help. All of them screaming. Then it stops. Complete silence except for the wind. I wait. My rifle pointed at the door, barely breathing. Minutes pass. Maybe it left. Maybe it gave up. Something scrapes across the roof. Slow and deliberate, like it's walking. Gee, up there. Back and forth, claws on wood. Then I hear it on the walls. Scratching, tapping, testing every board, every window, every crack, looking for a way in. I back into the corner and slide down until I'm sitting on the floor. My whole body is shaking. I want to pray, but I can't remember how. I haven't prayed since Vietnam, since I stopped believing God was listening. That's when I see the journal on the table. The journal is old, the cover stained and warped from water damage. I open it with shaking hands. The first page has a name written in pencil. Thomas Bradley, 1952. I start reading by the light of my lantern. March 15th, 1952. Been working the mine for 3 weeks now. Good silver vein. Should make me rich. My partner Jake says I'm crazy for working alone out here, but I like the quiet. March 30th, 1952. Something wrong with Jake. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. Says he's not hungry, but he looks at me funny, like I'm food. April 2nd, 1952. Jake tried to kill me last night. Had to hit him with a shovel. He ran off into the woods. I'm scared. April 5th, 1952. It's not Jake anymore. Something happened to him. He came back last night and stood outside the cabin. Looked like Jake, but taller. Thinner. Wrong. He called my name all night in different voices. I didn't let him in. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely turn the pages. April 8th, 1952. It killed the Henderson family. Found their bodies this morning. I tried to help, but it was too late. It's hunting now. It's always hungry. April 12th, 1952. I'm out of food, out of bullets. It knows. It's waiting. I can hear it breathing on the roof. April 14th, 1952. This is my last entry. If anyone finds this, the creature was once a man. Fire doesn't work. Bullets don't work. Only the heat kills it. Extreme heat. The mining furnace down below, that's the only way. But you have to trap it. You have to make it follow you down. It's breaking through the roof now. I can hear the boards cracking. I hope whoever reads this has better luck than me. The entry ends there. I flip through the rest of the pages, but they're all blank. On the roof, something starts tearing at the boards. I hear wood splintering. I look around the cabin desperately. There's a trapdoor in the floor. Must lead down to the mine tunnels. Maybe I can hide down there. Or maybe I can find this furnace Bradley wrote about. But then I see something on the shelf that changes everything. Old mining explosives, the kind they use to blast through rock. 6 sticks of dynamite wrapped in wax paper. After 26 years, they might not work. But they're all I have. The ceiling caves in with a crash. Snow and broken wood rain down, and I see it for the first time in full light. It's not pretending to be Jenny anymore. Now I see what it really is. 12 feet tall, thin, like it's starving but covered in ropey muscles. Skin that looks gray and dead, stretched tight over bones. Its hands and feet are too long, ending in black claws. But the worst part is the head. It has a human skull, but the jaw is huge, full of teeth like broken glass. And the eyes. Empty black holes that stare right through me. The wendigo. I know what it is now. I remember the stories from my training. The legends the old rangers told. A creature born from cannibalism and winter, always hungry, never satisfied. It drops down through the hole in the roof and lands on the cabin floor. The whole building shakes. We stare at each other for one long second. Then I grab the dynamite and run for the trapdoor. I yank it open and throw myself down into darkness. I hit the ground hard, maybe 8 feet down, and roll. My lantern smashes, plunging everything into black. Behind me, I hear the wendigo drop down into the tunnel. Its breathing echoes off the rock walls. I run blind, hands stretched out in front of me, feeling my way along the rough stone. The tunnel slopes down, getting colder. I can smell old earth and rust and something else, something rotten. The breathing is getting closer. My hand touches something in the dark. I stop, feeling it carefully. A stack of something smooth and round. I pull out my matches and strike one. Bones, human bones, stacked like firewood against the tunnel wall. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The match burns my fingers and I drop it. Darkness again. I keep moving, faster now, not caring when I bang into walls or trip over rocks. The tunnel branches and I take the left path without thinking. Then it branches again and I go right. I'm lost in a maze underground with that thing hunting me. Then I see light ahead. Not much, just a dim red glow. I stumble toward it and find myself in a large chamber. Old mining equipment is scattered everywhere, and in the middle of the room is a huge brick furnace, cold and dead. This must be what Bradley meant, this furnace. But how do I heat it? There's no wood, no coal, just rust and old metal and... Wait, the dynamite. If I could get the wendigo in here and then blow the dynamite inside the furnace, the explosion would be contained. The heat would be intense, concentrated in this small space. It might work. It has to work. I hear it entering the chamber behind me, that wet, hungry breathing. I turn around slowly. It's standing in the tunnel entrance, bent over because the ceiling is too low. In the dim red light from the furnace, it looks even more terrible. I can see old blood on its mouth, on its claws. Why? I ask. My voice cracks. Why are you doing this? It tilts its head, studying me. Then it speaks. Not with stolen voices this time, but with its own, a sound like wind through dead trees. Hungry, it says. Always hungry. You were a man once. Bradley's journal said so. You were Jake. Jake is gone. Only hunger remains. It takes a step toward me. I back up until I feel the cold brick of the furnace behind me. Ate my friend, it says. In the cave-in. He was dying anyway. I was so hungry, and then I became this. You don't have to kill anymore. I can help you. There are doctors. It laughs. The sound makes my bones hurt. There is no help. There is only feeding, and you. It sniffs the air. You have the taste. You've killed men. I can smell it on you. Vietnam. You know what it's like to take a life. That was war. That was different. No, it says, moving closer. It's all the same. All just meat. And soon you'll understand. Soon you'll be like me. It lunges. I dive to the side and the wendigo's claws slam into the brick where I was standing. Chunks of mortar explode outward. I roll to my feet and run for the opposite side of the chamber. There has to be something I can use. Some weapon. I see an old pickaxe leaning against the wall and I grab it. The wendigo turns toward me, taking its time now. It knows I can't escape. We're in a dead-end chamber, deep underground. I'm going to eat you slowly, it says. Keep you alive as long as possible. You'll beg me to finish it. It rushes forward faster than my eyes can follow. I swing the pickaxe with all my strength. The metal head catches it in the shoulder and sinks deep. The wendigo doesn't even flinch. It grabs the pickaxe handle and rips the tool out of its own body, then throws it away. The wound closes as I watch, flesh knitting back together in seconds. Nothing can kill me, it says. I've been shot, stabbed, burned. I heal from everything. I am eternal hunger. It grabs me by the throat and lifts me off the ground. My feet kick uselessly in the air. I can't breathe. Black spots dance in my vision. But first, it whispers, bringing its terrible face close to mine. I want you to feel what I feel. The hunger. The need. Let me share it with you. Something happens. I can't explain it. It's like the wendigo pushes something into my mind, something dark and awful, and suddenly I'm so hungry. Hungrier than I've ever been in my life. My stomach feels like it's eating itself. And I look at the Wendy's arm, and I think about how easy it would be to just bite, to taste, to feed. No, that's not me. That's not who I am. But the hunger grows stronger. I remember being in Vietnam, 3 days without food, so hungry I couldn't think straight. This is worse. This is like every hungry moment of my life combined and multiplied by 1,000. The wendigo drops me. I collapse on the ground, curled around my stomach, shaking. Feel it, it says softly. The hunger that never ends. The need that consumes everything. This is what I live with every second of every day. I look up at it, tears streaming down my face. Please, make it stop. There's only one way to stop it. Feed. It reaches down and picks up something from the ground. One of the bones from the tunnel. A human arm bone. Eat, it commands, holding the bone out to me. And God help me, I want to. Part of me, some animal part that's stronger than my will, wants nothing more than to grab that bone and gnaw on it until the hunger stops. I close my eyes. I think about Jenny. Real Jenny, not the monster's imitation. I think about how she smiles when she sees a bird she likes, how she cries during sad movies, how she holds my hand when I have nightmares about the war. No, I whisper. What? No, I shout it this time, and I open my eyes. I'm not you. I won't become you. The wendigo's face twists with rage. Then you'll die hungry! It raises its claws to kill me, and that's when I see my chance. The dynamite is still in my jacket pocket, the matches too. I grab a stick of dynamite and strike a match. The wendigo's eyes widen, the first time I've seen any expression except hunger on its face. Wait, I light the fuse and throw the dynamite into the furnace, then throw myself backward as hard as I can. The explosion is louder than anything I've ever heard. The blast wave hits me like a hammer, and I'm flying tip-saw, tumbling through the air. I slam into the tunnel wall and everything goes white. When I can see again, the chamber is full of smoke and dust. The furnace is blown apart, scattering red hot. Chunks of brick everywhere. Small fires burn on the wooden support beams. And in the middle of the chamber, the wendigo is screaming. The heat from the explosion didn't just burn it. The creature is melting like a candle. Its skin bubbles and runs. It claws at itself, trying to stop the damage, but its hands are melting too. No! It shrieks. No, not like this. I was eternal. I watch as it collapses, its body falling apart into steaming chunks. The smell is horrible, like burning meat and rotten eggs. But I'm not done. I grab the remaining dynamite from my pocket. 5 sticks left. I light them all at once and throw them onto the wendigo's dissolving body. The second explosion is bigger. The tunnel shakes and cracks appear in the walls. Rocks start falling from the ceiling. The mine is collapsing. I run. The hunger that the wendigo put in my mind is fading now, but I'm still weak. My legs barely work. Behind me, I hear the main chamber cave in with a roar like thunder. I see light ahead, the trapdoor to the cabin. I pull myself up through it and stumble out into the snow. The cabin floor is shaking. With the last of my strength, I run outside. Behind me, the entire cabin collapses as the mine underneath it gives way. Snow and dust billow up in a huge cloud. I fall to my knees in the snow, gasping. The blizzard has stopped. The moon is out, bright and cold and clean. It's over. They found me 3 days later. I don't remember much about those 3 days. I remember being cold, I remember the hunger slowly fading, leaving me empty. I remember drawing shapes in the snow with a stick, the same shape over and over. The wendigo's face. The rescue team said I'd lost 40 pounds. They said my body temperature was 10 degrees below normal and they couldn't figure out why. They asked me what happened, where the Nordstrom family was, what happened to Jenny. I told them about the blizzard, about finding the bodies, about the cave-in at the old mine. I didn't mention the wendigo. Who would believe me? They found Jenny's body a week later, or what was left of it. Her jacket had been hanging on a tree branch like a flag. The official report said she was killed by a bear. There are no bears in West Virginia that big, but nobody questioned it. People see what they want to see. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors ran every test they could think of. They couldn't explain my low body temperature or why I'd lost so much weight so fast. They definitely couldn't explain why I wouldn't eat meat anymore. Couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. They sent me to see a psychiatrist, Dr. Morrison, no relation to Jenny. She said I had PTSD from finding the bodies. Said the trauma of seeing all that death combined with my experiences in Vietnam had caused a mental break. Maybe she was right. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Maybe there was never any wendigo, just a bear or a mountain lion, and my mind turned it into a monster because that was easier to understand than random animal violence. But I don't think so. Because 3 months after I got out of the hospital, I went back to the collapsed mine. I had to see it in daylight, had to prove to myself it was really over. The cabin was gone, swallowed by the earth. The whole area was cordoned off, dangerous ground, unstable tunnels underneath. Nobody was allowed near it anymore. I stood at the edge of the collapse and I looked down into the darkness. And I swear I heard something down there, just for a second. Breathing. I don't work as a ranger anymore. I couldn't go back to those woods, couldn't walk those trails knowing what might be out there. I got a job at a hardware store in town. It's quiet work, safe, but sometimes, late at night, I still feel it. That hunger the wendigo put in my mind. It's faint now, barely a whisper, but it's there, always there. And sometimes I wonder, did I really kill it? Or did I just wound it, bury it under tons of rock where it sits in chut? The darkness, healing, waiting. Last week I heard on the news that some hikers went missing in Monongahela National Forest. A family of 3. They found the father's body 2 days ago. He'd been partially eaten. The news said it was a bear attack. But I know better. I called the ranger station and told them to check the old mining area to make sure the collapse hadn't opened up any new tunnels. The ranger I talked to, young kid, new on the job, he laughed and said I was worrying over nothing. Those old mines are sealed up tight, he said. Nothing's getting out of there. I didn't argue. What could I say? That there's a monster in the woods that eats people? That it was once a man who committed the ultimate sin and became something inhuman? That it can't be killed, only buried, and even then maybe not for long? He wouldn't believe me. Nobody would. So I just thanked him and hung up. And then I went to my closet and got out my old rifle from Vietnam. I cleaned it, oiled it, loaded it. Not that bullets will stop the wendigo, I know that now. But having it makes me feel better. Because if the hunger ever gets too strong, if I ever feel myself starting to change like Jake did, like the wendigo wanted me to, well, bullets might not stop a wendigo, but they'll stop a man. I keep the rifle by my bed now, just in case. And every night before I sleep, I check to make sure my doors are locked. I listen to the wind outside my window. I wait for the sound of breathing that doesn't belong to me. So far, I haven't heard it, but I know I will, someday. Because the thing about hunger is that it never really goes away. It just waits, patient, eternal. And in the cold places of the world, in the deep woods where people don't go, it walks alone. Always hungry, always hunting, always waiting for the next person who gets lost in the snow. My name is Janet Stormwind, and I've been a park ranger at Chattahoochee National Forest for 6 years. I love my job, the quiet trails, the smell of pine, the way morning fog sits in the valleys like cotton. Most days, the biggest problem I face is a lost hiker or a bear getting into someone's cooler. September 27, 1970, started like any other Monday. I woke up in my cabin near the ranger station, made coffee, and checked the weather reports. Clear skies, perfect hiking weather. That should have made me happy, but something felt off. The birds were too quiet. Even the squirrels seemed nervous. I was Cherokee on my grandmother's side, though I never knew much about that part of my family. Grandma died when I was little, and my mom didn't like talking about it. All I knew was that our family came from somewhere around here, back before the government forced everyone to leave in 1838. The radio crackled at 9:15 a.m. Ranger storm wind, we've got a missing persons report. Family of 4, the Hendersons. They were supposed to check in yesterday, but never showed up. I grabbed my pack and headed out. The Hendersons were experienced hikers. They'd been coming to Blood Mountain for years. The fact that they hadn't checked in worried me. Blood Mountain is the highest peak in the forest, rising 4,458 feet into the Georgia sky. The Cherokee used to call it something else, a name that meant where the bones sleep. White settlers renamed it after some battle happened up there long ago. Nobody remembers which battle or when exactly, just that a lot of people died. I found their campsite around noon. The tent was still up, sleeping bags laid out, food hanging properly in a bear bag, coffee pot sitting on the cold fire ring like they'd just stepped away for a minute. But there were no people. "Hello?" I called out. "Henderson family? It's Park Ranger Stormwind." Nothing. Just wind through all the pines. That's when I noticed the bones. Small pieces, scattered around the campsite like someone had dropped them. I picked one up. It was white, polished almost, and it looked human. A finger bone, maybe. My stomach turned cold. I'd seen animal bones before. Deer, rabbits, even bear. This was different. These bones were too clean, too white, like someone had boiled them and scrubbed them until they shined. I followed a trail of bone fragments into the woods. Every 10 feet or so, another small piece. The trees got thicker, the light got dimmer, and then I noticed the footprints. They started normal, hiking boot treads pressed into the dirt. But as I followed them deeper into the forest, something changed. The prints got stranger, lighter. The boot treads faded away until I was looking at bare footprints. Except these weren't normal bare feet. They were skeleton feet. I could see the individual toe bones pressed into the mud. The arch was gone, just the outline of bones. Like something that had no flesh was walking through these woods. My radio crackled with static. I tried calling the station. "Base, this is Stormwind. I found something weird at the Henderson campsite. Can you hear me?" More static. Then, faintly, I heard something that made my blood freeze. It was singing. Old singing, in a language I didn't know but somehow understood. Cherokee words, my grandmother's language, coming through a radio that should only pick up Park Service frequencies. The singing said, "The bone collectors are walking. The flesh must be given. The dead must rise." I dropped the radio. I should have left right then. Every instinct screamed at me to run back to my truck and get help. But rangers don't abandon missing people. 4 lives depended on me finding them. I kept following those impossible footprints deeper into the forest. The trees changed the further I went. They lallsound, ooked sick, their bark turning gray and peeling off in strips. Some of them had symbols carved into them, circles and spirals that made my eyes hurt to look at. The ground under my feet felt wrong, too soft, like walking on something that wasn't quite solid. Then I found the first skeleton. It was sitting upright against a tree, legs crossed, hands folded in its lap like it was praying. The bones were perfectly clean and white, arranged exactly right. Every bone in place, even the small ones in the hands and feet. I knew it was Mr. Henderson because his wallet sat next to the skeleton, along with his watch and wedding ring. There was no flesh, no blood, no clothes except what had been left behind when the body somehow became just bones. It looked like he'd been dead for years, but I'd just seen him in a photo at the ranger station 3 days ago. Alive, smiling. holding his daughter. I bent down, my hands shaking, and touched the skull. It was warm. I jerked back. Dead bones aren't warm. Dead bones don't feel like they were alive just minutes ago. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, reaching for the pepper spray on my belt. Nothing, just trees and shadows. But I could feel something watching me. Something old and patient. "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. The footsteps came again, closer. I could hear bones clicking together, like someone walking whose joints had no cartilage left to cushion them. I backed away from the skeleton, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. A figure stepped out from behind a tree. It was a skeleton, walking, moving like a person, but there was no muscle, no skin, nothing but bones held together by something I couldn't see. It wore scraps of old leather and beads around its neck. Cherokee warrior clothes from 200 years ago. The skeleton tilted its head, studying me. Its jaw opened, and it spoke in that same old Cherokee language I'd heard on the radio. I don't know how I understood the words. Maybe it was my grandmother's blood. Maybe it was something else. But I heard them clear as day. "You carry the blood of the people. You can see us. Finally, after all these years, someone who can see." "What are you?" I whispered. "I am what remains of Hawk that Flies. I died here in 1838 when the soldiers came. They killed my brothers, my father, my sons. 300 warriors fell on this mountain. They threw our bodies into a mass grave and called it victory." The skeleton took a step closer. Its bones gleamed in the dim forest light. "We have waited 132 years for the right time, for the right moon, for enough bones to bring us back. We are the bone collectors now. We take what we need. The Hendersons, they had Cherokee blood like you. The bones of the people call to the bones of the people. We need 100 skeletons to complete the ritual, to bring flesh back to our bones, to walk again as men instead of spirits trapped in dead frames." I ran. Branches whipped my face, roots grabbed at my feet. Behind me, I heard more footsteps, not just one skeleton, but many. The clicking of bone against bone echoed through the trees like a terrible song. I didn't know where I was going. The trail had disappeared. Every direction looked the same. The forest had become a maze. I burst through some bushes and nearly fell into a ravine. At the bottom, arranged in a perfect circle, were more skeletons. I counted 16, all sitting cross-legged, all facing center. And in the middle of the circle stood a woman and 2 children, the rest of the Henderson family. They were alive, huddled together, crying. Around them, 7 walking skeletons stood guard. Mrs. Henderson looked up and saw me. "Run!" she screamed. "They're going to—" One of the skeletons touched her shoulder. I watched as her flesh just disappeared. It didn't rot or decay. It vanished like smoke, leaving behind clean white bones that clattered to the ground. The whole process, too, maybe 3 seconds. The children screamed. One of the skeletons reached for them. I didn't think. I jumped down into the ravine, yelling, waving my arms, anything to distract those things from the kids. All 7 skeletons turned to look at me. The one who'd called himself Hawk that Flies stepped forward. "You cannot stop this. The moon will be full tomorrow night. The eclipse will come. We will rise again, all 300 of us, if we can gather enough bones. Do not interfere, daughter of the people." "Those are children," I said. "We were children too when the soldiers came. Did that stop the bullets? Did that stop them from burning our villages?" One of the Henderson kids broke free and ran toward me. He was maybe 10 years old, same age as my nephew. A skeleton reached out. I grabbed the kid and pulled him behind me. "No," I said. The skeleton paused. "You would fight us? You, who carry the blood of those we died protecting?" "I'm a park ranger. I protect people. All people." Hawk that Flies made a sound like laughing, though he had no lungs. "Then you will watch them all die, every person on this mountain. We need 23 more skeletons before the moon rises tomorrow, and we will have them." The skeletons vanished, just gone, like they'd never been there. I was left standing in that ravine with one terrified child and 16 skeletons arranged in their horrible circle. I got the kid out of there. His name was Tommy Henderson. He couldn't stop shaking. We made it back to my truck as the sun was setting. I radioed for help, but the static was worse now. All I could get through was fragments. Emergency, Blood Mountain, send. Tommy sat in the passenger seat, staring at nothing. They took my mom, he said quietly. They took my sister, right in front of me. They just turned into bones. I didn't know what to say. What do you tell a kid who just watched his family die in a way that shouldn't be possible? I drove toward the ranger station, but the road felt wrong. The trees were too close. The turns came in the wrong places. After 20 minutes, I realized we were driving in circles. The forest wasn't letting us leave. We have to go back, Tommy whispered. We have to stop them. Kid, we need to get you somewhere safe. There is no safe. They said they need 23 more people. There are 30 hikers on this mountain right now. I saw the sign-in sheet at the trailhead. They're going to kill everyone unless someone stops them. He was right. And I was the only one who could see these things. I pulled over and checked my gear. I had my ranger equipment, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and a knife. None of it would work against walking skeletons, but I knew someone who might have answers. Daniel Redwing lived at the base of Blood Mountain. He was Cherokee, one of the few who'd stayed in Georgia after the forced removal. He was 87 years old and knew more about these mountains than anyone alive. I drove to his cabin. He was sitting on his porch like he'd been waiting for us. You've seen them, he said before I could speak. The bone collectors. How did you? My grandfather warned me. His grandfather warned him. Every generation we pass down the story. The warriors who died on Blood Mountain, their spirits couldn't rest. Too much anger, too much pain. They waited for the right time, the right moon, to try to come back. He invited us inside and made tea. His hands shook as he poured. There's a ritual, he said. If they gather 100 skeletons of people with Cherokee blood and perform the ceremony during a lunar eclipse, they can return to flesh. But it has to be done in the bone chamber. What bone chamber? Under Blood Mountain, deep caves that go down into the earth. That's where they threw our people's bodies in 1838. Mass graves. The chamber is built from our ancestors' bones. Tommy spoke up. Can we stop them? Daniel looked at him sadly. There's only one way. Someone with Cherokee blood has to go into the Cha'as, Ember, and destroy the bone circle before the eclipse happens. But it's suicide. Those warriors have been dead for 132 years. They're stronger than living people now, and they won't let anyone stop them. He went to a back room and came back with something wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, I saw a knife. The blade was made of bone, carved with symbols. This belonged to my great-grandfather. It's the only weapon that can hurt them. Bone against bone. But Janet, he looked at me seriously. If you do this, you might not come back. I took the knife. It felt warm in my hand, like it was alive. I have to try, I said. We left Tommy with Daniel and headed back up the mountain. It was full dark now. My flashlight cut through the trees, making shadows jump and dance. I found the trail that led to the ravine. The bone circle was still there, but now there were 22 skeletons instead of 16. 6 more people had died while I was gone. And there were sounds in the forest. Screaming. Running footsteps. The bone collectors were hunting. I ran toward the screams and found 2 college students backed against a cliff. 3 skeletons were closing in on them. Hey! I yelled, pulling out the bone knife. The skeletons turned. One of them rushed at me, moving faster than anything dead should move. I slashed with the knife. The blade cut through the skeleton's ribs, and the bones shattered like glass. The skeleton collapsed into a pile of broken fragments that turned to dust. The other 2 skeletons backed away. Run, I told the students. They didn't need to be told twice, but more skeletons were coming. I could hear them in the trees, clicking, walking, hunting. I ran toward the mountain looking for the entrance to the caves Daniel had described. There had to be a way down. a way to stop this at its source. That's when I found her. A woman, maybe 30 years old, sitting against a tree. She was crying, holding her arm where a skeleton had touched her. The flesh was gone from her hand, just bone from the wrist down. "Help me," she whispered. "Please." I knelt beside her. But I could already see it was too late. The bone sickness was spreading. Her flesh was turning gray, starting to flake away. "What's your name?" I asked. "Sarah. Sarah Crow." Crow. Cherokee name. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry." She looked at her hand, at the white bones of her fingers. "It doesn't hurt," she said, sounding surprised. I thought it would hurt. Then her whole body collapsed into bones. I heard Hawk That Fly's voice behind me. 23. We have 23 now. The circle is almost complete. Why do you still fight us, daughter of the people?" I stood up, gripping the bone knife. "Because I'm also a daughter of the living, and I won't let you kill anyone else." He tilted his skull. "Then come. Come to the bone chamber. Face us in our home. If you can stop us, try." The ground opened up beneath me. I fell, tumbling through darkness, and landed hard in a cave. And I saw them. Hundreds of skeletons. Thousands. The walls were made of bones. The floor was bones. Skulls stared down at me from every surface. In the center of the chamber, arranged in a perfect circle, were 23 fresh white skeletons, the people the bone collectors had taken. And standing around them were not 7 skeletons anymore. There were 300. The entire Cherokee war band, risen from their mass grave, waiting for the eclipse that would bring them back to life. The bone chamber was bigger than any cave had a right to be. It stretched away into darkness, walls made of thousands of bones from people who died here 132 years ago. The air smelled like old earth and something else. Something like the smell of dust in an old church. 300 skeleton warriors stood between me and the fresh circle of bones. I couldn't fight them all. I couldn't even fight 10. The bone knife had destroyed 1 skeleton, but there were 299 more. Hawk That Flies stepped forward. "You are brave, Janet Stormwind. Your grandmother would be proud. She was Red Cloud's daughter, you know. Red Cloud was one of us. He died on this mountain trying to protect our village. My grandmother's father. Great-grandfather. He was 15 when the soldiers shot him," Hawk That Flies continued. "Just a boy. He bled out in the forest while they burned our homes." I felt something twist in my chest. These weren't monsters. They were people who'd been murdered, people whose only crime was existing in a place someone else wanted. "I understand your anger," I said, "but killing innocent people won't bring you justice." "Justice?" The skeleton's jaw opened wide. "There is no justice. There is only bone and dust and the long wait between death and resurrection. We have waited 132 years for this moment. The eclipse happens in 2 hours. With 100 skeletons of Cherokee blood, we can reverse what was done to us. We can live again. By becoming murderers yourselves. We are already dead. What does murder mean to bones?" The other skeletons moved closer, forming a circle around me. I raised the knife, but I knew it was hopeless. Then I heard a voice. Soft. Familiar. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Little Hawk with storm in her name. I knew that voice. I'd heard it in dreams sometimes, singing old songs. "Grandma?" A figure appeared in the darkness. Not a skeleton, a ghost. An old Cherokee woman with kind eyes and gray hair and braids. "You have her blood," Hawk That Flies said. "Red Cloud's daughter walks with you." My grandmother's spirit moved through the skeletons like smoke. They didn't try to stop her. She came and stood beside me, her hand passing through mine, but somehow warm anyway. "These are my brothers," she said softly. "My father's friends, men who died protecting me. But they are wrong now. Death has made them forget what they were protecting. Life, not revenge, not resurrection. Just life." She turned to face the skeletons. "I died too. I died in 1955 at 62 years old. I lived a full life. I had children and grandchildren. I saw the world change. Is what you took from these people. She gestured to the 23 fresh skeletons in the circle. They deserved that chance, just like you did. Hawk That Flies was silent for a long moment. Then, what would you have us do? Stay dead? Forgive? Yes, my grandmother said. Let go. The anger has burned for 132 years. Let it end. And the ones who killed us? They lived full lives. They died in their beds, old and satisfied. Where is the justice in that? There is no justice, I said quietly. There never was. That's what makes what happened to you so terrible. But stealing life from others won't fix it. It just makes more victims, more bones that can't rest. The chamber was silent except for the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Then one of the skeletons stepped forward, a smaller one, young, maybe 15 or 16 when he died. I am tired, the skeleton said. I have been angry for so long. I don't want to be angry anymore. Another skeleton moved, then another. They were breaking formation, moving toward the center of the circle. But not all of them. Some of the skeletons stood firm, their bone hands curled into fists. No, one of them said. We were promised resurrection. We have the bones. We have the circle. In 2 hours, the eclipse will complete the ritual whether you help or not. I looked at my grandmother's ghost. Is that true? She nodded sadly. The ritual doesn't need them anymore. The circle is complete. When the eclipse reaches totality, the magic will happen on its own. All those warriors will return to flesh whether they want to or not. But they'll be wrong. Twisted. You can't force life back into bones that have been dead this long. They'll be monsters. How do I stop it? Break the circle. Destroy the bones before the eclipse. I looked at the 23 skeletons arranged in their perfect circle. Families, students, hikers, people who'd come to these mountains to enjoy nature and found death instead. And I'd have to break their bones, smash their remains, turn them to dust. I can't, I whispered. You must, my grandmother said, or 300 monsters will rise and kill everyone on this mountain, then everyone in the towns below. The ritual will make them hungry. Endless hunger for flesh they can never satisfy. I walked toward the circle. The skeletons who wanted resurrection moved to stop me, but the ones who were tired of anger held them back. It became a battle, skeleton against skeleton, bone clashing on bone in the darkness. I reached the circle of 23. The bone knife felt heavy in my hand. I'm sorry, I said to the dead. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Then I started breaking bones. Each one shattered like glass under the knife. With every strike, I felt something inside me break too. These had been people. Real people with families and dreams. The skeletons who wanted resurrection screamed, a terrible sound like wind through caves. They tried to reach me, but my grandmother's spirit and the tired warriors held them back. I reached the center of the circle. One more skeleton to destroy, and the ritual would be incomplete. It couldn't work without all 23. The last skeleton was small. A child, maybe 8 years old. Tommy's sister. My hands shook. I couldn't do it. I couldn't destroy a child's bones. You must, my grandmother said. The eclipse is beginning. Through a crack in the cave ceiling, I could see the moon. Shadow was creeping across its face. The skeletons who wanted resurrection broke free. They rushed toward me, bone hands reaching. I raised the knife. I'm sorry, I whispered to Tommy's sister. I'm so sorry. I brought the knife down. The bones exploded into dust. The circle broke, and the cave filled with light so bright I had to close my eyes. When the light faded, the skeletons were gone. Not destroyed, just gone. Released. The ones who wanted peace had found it. The ones who wanted resurrection had been denied. But I could still hear their voices in the darkness, angry and hungry. This isn't over. We will find another way. We will rise again. Then silence. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. They told me Daniel Redwing found me at the base of Blood Mountain, covered in bone dust, clutching a knife made of bone. I was unconscious and wouldn't wake up. When I finally opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was my own reflection in a mirror across the room. My hair had turned completely white. I was 27 years old, but I looked 50. The doctors couldn't explain it. They ran tests and found nothing wrong except that I'd somehow aged 20 years in 3 days. The FBI came to interview me. I told them about the missing hikers, about finding the Henderson family, about the cave. I didn't tell them about the skeletons. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. They searched Blood Mountain for 2 weeks. They found 23 skeletons arranged in a circle in a cave system nobody knew existed. All the bones were identified, missing persons from the past 10 years, all with Cherokee ancestry. They never found out how those people died. The official report said, unknown circumstances. Tommy Henderson survived. He's in foster care now. Sometimes he writes me letters. He never mentions what happened to his family. Neither do I. Daniel Redwing died 2 days after they found me. Heart attack, they said, but I think he just knew his job was done. He'd passed the knife and the knowledge to me. I was the guardian now. I went back to work as a ranger last month. I had to. Because I can still see them sometimes, in the corner of my eye, bones moving through the forest, spirits that won't rest. The bone collectors are still out there. Maybe not on Blood Mountain anymore, but somewhere, waiting, planning, looking for another way to rise. And I'm the only one who can see them. My grandmother visits sometimes. Her ghost sits on my porch in the evening, and we don't talk. We don't need to. She's keeping watch with me. Because the thing about bones is they never really go away. They're always there, underneath, waiting. Every person you see is just flesh wrapped, around a skeleton, hiding what we all become eventually. I know that now. I know it every time I look in the mirror and see an old woman's face on a young woman's body. I know it every time I walk the trails and see bone dust in the shadows. The bone collectors will try again. Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not for another 100 years, but they'll try. And when they do, someone will need to stop them. Someone who carries Cherokee blood and can see the dead. Someone like me. I keep the bone knife under my bed now. I don't sleep well anymore. When I do sleep, I dream of caves made of bones and skeletons that dance in the moonlight, waiting for the right eclipse. The doctors say my condition is permanent. The white hair, the aged face. They say stress and trauma can do strange things to the body. But I know the truth. The bone collectors took something from me. Not flesh, not bone, something else. Something that kept me young. Maybe it was years of my life. Maybe it was innocence. Maybe it was the part of me that could walk through a forest and just see trees. Whatever it was, it's gone now. All that's left is me, a bone knife, and the long wait for the next eclipse. I'm a park ranger. I protect people, even if it costs me everything, even if nobody believes me, even if the only thing standing between the living and the bone collectors is one aging woman who can see what others can't. I'll keep watch, until my bones join the others in the forest, until I become part of the mountain myself. That's my job now. Guardian of Blood Mountain, watcher of bones, the last line between the dead who should rest and the living who should live. It's not the job I wanted, but it's the job I've got. And I'll do it until the day my own flesh turns to dust and I'm nothing but bones myself, sitting in a cave somewhere, waiting for someone to decide if I should rest or rise. My name is Marcus Wolfstone, but everyone calls me Mac. I've been a ranger in Daniel Boone National Forest for 22 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these Kentucky woods could throw at me. Bears, wildcats, lost hikers, illegal hunters. Nothing surprised me anymore. At least, that's what I told myself until October 15th, 1984. The morning started normal enough. Coffee at 5, radio check at 6, then out on patrol in my old Ford pickup. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under my boots as I walked the trails. I loved this time of year. The tourists were mostly gone, and the forest felt peaceful. That peace ended when I found the hunting camp. I smelled it before I saw it. That sweet, sick smell of death mixed with something else I couldn't place. Something wild. My stomach turned as I pushed through the thick brush near Devil's Creek. The camp was in a small clearing, and what I found there still haunts my dreams. 8 hunters, all dead. But they weren't just killed. They were torn apart like wild animals had gotten to them. Worse than that, they were arranged in a pattern, almost like someone had posed them on purpose. Their camping gear was scattered everywhere, tents shredded, coolers overturned, blood soaked into the pine needles. I'd seen bear attacks before. This wasn't bears. The tracks around the camp made my skin crawl. They started as boot prints, human boot prints, but then they changed. Got longer, wider, claws instead of heels. Some looked almost like wolf tracks, but too big, way too big. I called it in on my radio, hands shaking as I spoke to dispatch. "This is Ranger Wolfstone. I need backup at Devil's Creek camping area. Multiple fatalities. Send everyone." Static crackled back, then Sarah's voice. "Copy that, Mac. How many victims?" 8 confirmed. "And Sarah? Call the state police. This is way beyond what we can handle." As I waited for backup, I walked the edge of the camp trying to piece together what happened. The hunters had put up a fight. Shell casings everywhere, but no blood trails leading away from the camp. Whatever killed them, it didn't run off wounded. That's when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Claw marks on the trees, 10 feet up. Deep gouges in the bark that looked almost like letters. Like someone, or something, was trying to write. I was studying those marks when I heard it. A low howl from deep in the forest. Not like any wolf I'd ever heard. This sound had something else in it. Something that made every instinct in my body scream, "Run." But I couldn't run. Not yet. Because hanging from one of those clawed trees, I found something that changed everything. My brother Jake's ranger badge. Jake had disappeared 7 years ago during a routine patrol. We never found his body, never found any trace of him. The official report said he probably fell in a ravine somewhere, got covered by leaves. Case closed. But here was his badge, hanging like a trophy. My hands were still shaking when the backup arrived. State police, coroner, even some FBI agents who seemed very interested in those strange tracks. They asked a lot of questions I couldn't answer. That night, alone in my cabin, I stared at Jake's badge and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. The arrangement of the bodies, the impossible tracks, the claw marks that looked almost like writing, and that howl. That terrible howl that sounded like it came from something that was part animal, part human, and completely wrong. I should have left it to the FBI. Should have taken some vacation time and let someone else handle the investigation. But Jake was my brother. My little brother who'd followed me into the ranger service, who'd trusted me to teach him how to survive in these woods. If something had him, I was going to find it. The next morning, I went back to the crime scene. The FBI had cleared out most of the evidence, but they'd missed something. High up in an old oak tree, about 40 feet off the ground, someone was moving. "Hey!" I shouted. "You okay up there?" A weak voice called back, "Don't come any closer. They might still be around." It took me 20 minutes and a lot of coaxing to get him down. His name was Pete Richardson, and he was shaking so hard he could barely hold onto the rope I threw up to him. When he finally made it to the ground, I could see he was in bad shape. His left arm was torn up, deep claw marks from shoulder to wrist. He'd lost a lot of blood. "You were with the hunting party?" I asked, helping him sit against a tree. Pete nodded, eyes darting around the forest. "I was the guide. Brought them out here 3 days ago for elk season. Everything was normal until..." He stopped, shaking his head. "You won't believe me." "Try me." Pete took a shaky breath. "They came at night. At first, we thought they were just wolves. Big ones, but still wolves. Then they started talking." My skin went cold. "Talking?" "In English. Planning their attack like soldiers. They surrounded our camp, cut off every escape route. But they weren't just wolves, Mac. They were walking on two legs, had hands, human hands with claws. I wanted to tell him he was in shock, seeing things. But I'd seen those tracks, those impossible tracks that changed from human to animal. How many? I asked. 7, maybe 8. Hard to tell in the dark. But there was one that was bigger than the others. The leader. He was huge, had to be 9 feet tall, silver and black fur, but his eyes... Pete shuddered. His eyes were human, smart. He looked right at me and smiled with those wolf teeth. Pete described how the attack happened. The pack had come from all directions at once, moving through the darkness like ghosts. They'd torn through the camp in minutes, but they didn't just kill. They played with their prey first. They knew our names, Pete whispered. Kake told us by name while they hunted us. How could they know our names? He told me about climbing the tree, about how the pack had kept him trapped for almost 2 days. They'd taken turns standing guard, talking to each other in that mix of howls and human speech. Sometimes they'd tell him exactly how they planned to kill him. Sometimes they'd just stare up at him with those 2 human eyes. Why didn't they come up after you? I asked. I don't think they could. Or maybe they just wanted to keep me for later, like saving dessert. As Pete talked, I noticed something else. The forest around us was completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, nothing. Like every living thing had fled. There's something else, Pete said, voice dropping to almost a whisper. I recognized one of them. Tommy Hendricks. He went missing hiking around here 2 years ago. Made the papers and everything, but there he was, running with the pack, still had his hiking boots on. That's when I heard it. That howl from deep in the woods. The same one from yesterday, but closer now. Much closer. Pete went rigid beside me. They're coming back. I helped him to his feet, but we both knew he couldn't run in his condition. The howl came again, and this time it was answered by others. A whole chorus of voices that weren't quite human and weren't quite animal. My radio crackled to life, but instead of dispatch, a deep voice spoke through the static. Ranger Wolfstone. I grabbed the radio with shaking hands. Who is this? You found our hunting ground. You took our trophy from the tree. The voice was calm, educated, human. But underneath it was something else. A growl that made my teeth ache. Where's my brother? I demanded. A sound that might have been laughter. Jake is with us now, has been for 7 years. He hunts well. That's impossible. Jake would never. Would never what? Kill humans. You'd be surprised what family will do when they understand the truth, when they join the pack. The radio went dead. Pete was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. Mac, he whispered. Look. I turned to see shapes moving through the trees. Dark shapes that walked upright but moved with the fluid grace of predators. They stayed just at the edge of vision, but I could see enough to know Pete hadn't been hallucinating. They were real, and they were hunting us. We ran. Pete was hurt bad, but fear gave him strength. I led us deeper into the forest, toward an old ranger station that might give us some protection. Behind us, I could hear them following. Not just footsteps, but voices. They were calling to each other, coordinating like a military unit. This way, I gasped, pulling Pete toward a creek. Water might slow them down. But as we splashed across the shallow stream, one of them stepped out from behind a tree. Up close, it was even worse than Pete had described. 9 feet tall, covered in gray-black fur, but standing upright like a man. Its face was a horrible mix of wolf and human, with intelligent eyes that looked right through me. Hello, Mac, it said in that same cultured voice from the radio. I'm Robert Grimm. I used to be sheriff in these parts. I knew that name. Sheriff Grimm had disappeared 7 years ago, same time as Jake. Another unsolved case. What are you? I managed to ask. I'm what happens when someone goes too deep into these woods. When they find things that shouldn't exist. His lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. showing rows of sharp teeth. Your brother learned that lesson. Now it's your turn. More shapes emerged from the trees. The whole pack surrounding us. Each one had that same horrible mix of human intelligence and animal savagery. I noticed their clothes, or what was left of them. Hiking boots, torn jeans, pieces of uniforms. These had all been people once. Jake knew these woods better than anyone, Grim continued. Made him valuable to us. He leads our hunting parties now. I don't believe you. Another figure stepped forward and my heart stopped. It was Jake, or what Jake had become. He still looked mostly human, but his eyes reflected light like an animal's. His fingernails had grown into claws. Hello, brother, Jake said, and his voice was the same one I remembered from childhood. Jake, what did they do to you? They set me free. He tilted his head, studying me with those terrible eyes. Do you know what it's like, Mac? Spending your whole life protecting people who don't even care about the forest? People who come out here to kill for sport, who leave their trash everywhere, who destroy everything they touch? That's not... You don't mean that. Don't I? Jake stepped closer. How many times did we find camps full of drunk idiots who started forest fires? How many poachers did we catch killing animals just for their antlers? The pack doesn't protect humans, Mac. We protect the forest from humans. I backed away, pulling Pete with me, but there was nowhere to go. They had us surrounded. The choice is simple, Grim said. Join us willingly, or join us anyway. Your tracking skills would be very useful. What about him? I nodded toward Pete. He's food. The pack leader's eyes gleamed. We've been hunting for 3 days. We're hungry. That's when Pete surprised me. Despite his injuries, despite being terrified out of his mind, he grabbed the flare gun from my belt and fired it straight into Grim's face. The pack leader screamed, a sound that was part human agony and part animal rage. The bright red flare stuck to his fur, burning him. He clawed at his face, howling. Run! Pete shouted. I grabbed him, and we bolted through the gap in their circle. Behind us, the whole pack erupted in howls of rage. They were coming after us, and this time they weren't going to play games. We ran through thick brush, branches tearing at our clothes. I could hear them crashing through the trees behind us, faster than any human could move. Pete was slowing down, his injuries catching up with him. Leave me, he gasped. Get to safety. Not happening. But I knew we weren't going to make it. They were too fast, and we were too far from help. That's when I saw smoke rising through the trees ahead. A campfire. There, I pointed. Someone's up there. We crashed through the last of the brush and stumbled into a small clearing where an old man sat by a fire. He looked up as we arrived, completely calm despite our panic. Zeke Crowder, he said, introducing himself. Been expecting you. There's no time, I panted. They're right behind us. I know. Zeke stood up slowly, revealing he was holding an old rifle. Been waiting for them, too. The pack burst into the clearing just as Zeke raised his weapon. The gunshot was impossibly loud. Grim, still clutching his burned face, stumbled backward. Silver blood poured between his fingers. Silver bullets, Zeke explained calmly, working the bolt on his rifle. Only thing that really hurts them. The pack hesitated, suddenly wary. Their leader was hurt, maybe dying. But Jake stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. You don't understand, old man. We're not just animals you can hunt. No, Zeke agreed. You're worse. You're people who chose to become monsters. He fired again, catching one of the pack members in the shoulder. The creature screamed and fell backward. The cave, Zeke said to me, not taking his eyes off the pack. Devil's Den. That's where they sleep during the day. If we're going to end this, that's where we need to go. Why would we want to go there? Because, Zeke said, firing another silver bullet. That's where they keep the others, the ones they're turning. Jake's eyes met mine across the clearing. For just a moment, I saw something human in them. something that looked like regret. Then the pack melted back into the forest, carrying their wounded leader. But I knew they'd be back. And next time, they'd be ready for silver bullets. Zek. He led us to his cabin as darkness fell. The place was like a fortress, windows boarded up, silver crosses nailed to every door, and enough weapons to outfit a small army, all of them loaded with silver bullets. Been preparing for this for 30 years, he explained, cleaning his rifle, ever since I saw them take Sheriff Grimm. Pete was slumped in a chair, his wounds finally bandaged. How many people have they taken? Dozens, maybe hundreds. They don't turn everyone. Most folks they just eat. But the ones with useful skills, the ones they want to keep. Zeke shook his head. The transformation takes 3 days. After that, there's no going back. Jake seemed to recognize me, I said, like part of him was still human. Oh, they remember everything. That's what makes them so dangerous. They have all their human intelligence, but none of their human conscience. Your brother knows every trail, every hiding spot, every ranger protocol. Makes him the perfect hunter. Zeke spread out a hand-drawn map on his table. Devil's Den is here, about 2 miles north. Cave system goes deep into the mountain. That's where they sleep during the day, and where they keep their prisoners. You think there are people still alive down there? Maybe. Pack's been active for 3 days now. Might be saving some for later. He looked at me seriously. But Mac, you need to understand. If we go down there, we might not come back out. I studied the map, thinking about Jake, about the look in his eyes. What if some of them can be saved? What if the transformation can be reversed? Zeke was quiet for a long moment. There are stories, old Cherokee stories about wolf spirits and how to break their hold. But it requires a sacrifice. Someone the transformed person loves has to be willing to die for them. Then we have to try. Pete struggled to sit up. Count me in. Those things killed. My friends, they're going to pay. You're in no shape to fight, I told him. Maybe not, but I know their weaknesses now. They can't cross running water easily. They hate bright light, and they're stronger at night but vulnerable during the day. He pointed to his bandaged arm. Besides, I think I'm changing too. Been feeling different since they clawed me. That hit me like a punch to the gut. How different? My hearing's better. I can smell things I couldn't before. And I'm hungry for meat. Raw meat. Pete's voice was steady, but his eyes were scared. If I'm turning into one of them, I'd rather die fighting them. We spent the rest of the night preparing. Zeke had silver bullets, silver knives, even silver chains. He told us about the cave system, about the main chamber where the pack gathered. He'd been watching them for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Why now? I asked. Because they're getting bolder. Bigger hunting parties, more people disappearing. And because... He hesitated. Because I'm getting old. This might be my last chance. Just before dawn, we made our move. The forest was eerily quiet as we approached Devil's Den. The cave entrance was a black mouth in the side of the mountain, surrounded by bones. Human bones, picked clean. They'll be sleeping, Zeke whispered. But they'll have guards. He was right. As we got closer, I could see 2 figures standing at the cave entrance. In the early morning light, they looked almost human. Almost. Zeke took them down with 2 precise shots. The silver bullets dropped them instantly, but the gunfire echoed through the cave system like thunder. So much for stealth, Pete muttered. We moved into the cave, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The smell hit us immediately. Death, decay, and something else. Something wild and wrong. The main chamber was huge, with tunnels branching off in every direction. And there, scattered around the floor, were the sleeping forms of the pack. They looked smaller in sleep, more human. But I could see their claws, their elongated faces, fur covering their bodies. There, Zeke pointed to a side tunnel. That's where they keep prisoners. We found 3 people chained to the cave wall, all unconscious. One of them was already starting to change. His fingernails dark and pointed, his face stretched into something not quite human. We're too late for him, Zeke said sadly. But these 2. That's when they woke up, all of them at once, like they were connected by some invisible signal. The pack rose from their sleeping places, eyes reflecting our flashlight beams like mirrors. Grim stepped forward, his face a ruin of burn scars from Pete's flare. Did you really think 3 humans could walk into our den and survive? 4 humans, Jake said, emerging from the shadows behind us. Don't forget me. But instead of blocking our escape, Jake raised a silver knife and drove it into the pack member nearest to him. The creature screamed and fell, silver blood pooling on the cave floor. Jake! I shouted. I remember, Mac. I remember everything. What I was, what I became, what I did. His voice was thick with emotion. I can't undo it, but I can end it. The pack erupted in chaos. Jake fought with savage intensity, using his claws and teeth against his former allies. Zeke's rifle boomed again and again, silver bullets finding their targets. Pete, despite his injuries, fought with desperate courage. But there were too many of them. Grim came straight for me, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. His claws raked across my chest, sending me sprawling. I rolled away just as he landed where my head had been. Your brother was easy to turn, he snarled. You'll be even easier. That's when Jake tackled him from behind. The 2 monsters rolled across the cave floor, clawing and biting at each other. Jake was smaller, but he fought with the fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. The ritual! Zeke shouted over the sounds of battle. The Cherokee ritual! You have to be willing to die for him! I understood. Grabbing a silver knife from the cave floor, I rushed toward Todd, the fighting brothers. But instead of attacking Grim, I pressed the blade to my own throat. Jake, I called out. I forgive you. All of it. I love you, brother. Jake looked up, his eyes meeting mine. For a moment the monster fell away, and I saw my little brother again, the one who'd followed me into the woods, who'd trusted me to keep him safe. Mac, I'm sorry. The change started immediately. Jake's fur began to fall away, his face shifting back toward human. But the transformation was killing him. He screamed in agony as his body fought between forms. Grim saw his chance and lunged at me, but Pete was there, silver chain in his hands. He wrapped it around the pack leader's throat and held on as Grim clawed at him. Now, Pete shouted, while he's down. I drove the silver knife deep into Grim's chest. The pack leader's scream shook the entire cave. Around us, the other pack members collapsed as their alpha died. The psychic link that bound them together was broken, but so was Jake. He lay on the cave floor, human again, but dying. I knelt beside him, holding his hand as his life ebbed away. I'm sorry, Mac, he whispered. I tried to fight it, but the hunger, it was so strong. I know. Don't let them rebuild the pack. Don't let this happen to anyone else. Those were his last words. We found 5 pack members still alive, unconscious, but breathing. The transformation had been broken when Grim died, leaving them human again, but traumatized beyond repair. 2 of them were hikers who'd been missing for months. One was Tommy Hendricks, the man Pete had recognized. None of them remembered much of their time with the pack. Maybe that was a mercy. The authorities never believed our full story. How could they? We told them about a survivalist cult, about people driven to cannibalism by isolation and madness. They seemed satisfied with that explanation. Zeke disappeared the night after the cave battle. I went to his cabin the next morning and found it empty, like no one had ever lived there. The only trace of him was a note on the table. Others will come. Be ready. Pete survived, but he was changed. Not physically. The transformation hadn't progressed that far. But something in his eyes was different. Wilder. He left Kentucky a week later, said he needed to be somewhere with more people, fewer trees. I stayed. Someone had to watch the forest to make sure the pack didn't rebuild. The FBI closed the case, but I knew better. 5 pack members had escaped during the battle. They were out there somewhere, maybe trying to start over. I kept Jake's badge on my desk, next to the report I wrote but never filed. The real report about what really happened in Devil's Den. Sometimes late at night, when the wind howls through the trees, I take it out and read it again, just to remind myself that it was real. 3 months later, I found another hunting camp, empty this time, but the signs were there. Tracks that changed from human to animal, claw marks on trees that looked almost like writing, and hanging from a branch just like before was a piece of evidence, a hiker's backpack from someone who'd been reported missing the week before. I radioed it in, but I also loaded my rifle with silver bullets. Zeke had left me a few, along with instructions on how to make more. Because he was right, others would come. The pack might be broken, but the forest remembers. And some hungers never really die. They just wait for the right moment to feed again. My name is Marcus Wolfstone, and I'm the ranger who watches Devil's Den. I've seen what happens when people go too deep into these woods, when they find things that shouldn't exist. And I'll be ready when they come back. Because they always come back. The pack that never sleeps is still out there, somewhere in the darkness between the trees. And every night when I hear that distant howl echoing through the forest, I remember my brother's last words. Don't let them rebuild the pack. I won't, Jake, I promise. Even if it kills me. My name is Gabriel Thornfield, and I used to be a priest. Used to be, until God showed me something I wasn't supposed to see. Now I'm a park ranger at Mount Rogers in Virginia, the highest peak in the state. Been doing this job for 13 years, and most folks think I lost my faith somewhere along the way. Truth is, I found something much worse than losing faith. I found out what's really watching us from the stars. It started in May of 1989. I was sitting in my cabin going through incident reports when the pattern hit me like a slap in the face. 5 different reports from 5 different mountains, all in the past month. All describing the same thing. People having religious experiences at the highest points in the Appalachians. The first report came from Blackwater Falls. Hikers found unconscious on the rocks, no memory of how they got there. They all talked about seeing angels before everything went dark. The second was from Seneca Rocks. Climbers discovered strange bone formations that spelled out words in languages nobody could identify. New River Gorge had reports of missing skin from campers' backs, perfect squares cut away while they slept. Spruce Knob had the worst one. A family of 4 found standing in a circle, holding hands, completely brain dead, but still breathing. I'd seen this before. 13 years ago, right here on Mount Rogers, the night I stopped being Father Thornfield and became just Gabriel. That night, I'd climbed to the summit to pray. I was struggling with doubt, wondering if I really believed anymore. The stars were brighter than I'd ever seen them, so bright they hurt to look at. That's when I saw it. A shape moving between the stars, something massive and many-legged like a spider made of shadow and starlight. It spoke to me without words, showed me visions of other worlds, other mountains, other harvests. When I woke up, 3 Ds. Days later, at the base of the mountain, my hair had turned white and I couldn't remember how to say Mass. The church said I had a breakdown. They were wrong. I had a revelation. Now, looking at these reports spread across my desk, I knew it was starting again. The thing I'd seen was coming back, and this time it wasn't just visiting. This time, it was preparing for something bigger. I grabbed my radio and truck keys. Whatever was happening on those other mountains, Mount Rogers was the center of it. The reports were getting closer, forming a pattern that led straight here. I had to warn someone, had to make them understand. But who believes an ex-priest turned park ranger when he tells you something from space is hunting human souls? The drive up the mountain took an hour, but I felt like I was racing against time itself. The closer I got to the summit, the more wrong everything felt. Birds weren't singing. Insects had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. At the ranger station, I spread out a map of the Appalachians and marked every location from the reports. The pattern was clear now, a perfect five-pointed star with Mount Rogers at the center. Each point was a different mountain, each incident a different type of preparation. Memory removal, bone arrangement, flesh collection, mind harvesting. It was building something, getting ready. I tried calling the other ranger stations, but the phones were dead. Radio came back with nothing but static. As the sun set behind the trees, I realized I was completely alone on the highest mountain in Virginia with something that had been planning this moment for years. The stars began to shine, brighter and brighter, until they looked close enough to touch. The first person I found was Sarah Chen, a geology student from Virginia Tech. I discovered her tent at the base camping area just after midnight during what should have been a routine patrol. The tent was pristine, no tears, no signs of struggle, but Sarah was gone. I found her 300 yards away, standing perfectly still in a clearing, staring up at the sky. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Sarah?" I called out, my flashlight beam dancing across her face. "Sarah, can you hear me?" She turned toward me with movements that were too smooth, too graceful. When she spoke, her voice sounded like she was talking through water. "Ranger Thornfield, I've been waiting for you." She tilted her head at an impossible angle. "It told me you'd come. It remembers you from before." My blood turned to ice. "What told you that?" Sarah raised her arm and pointed at the sky. Following her gesture, I looked up and immediately wished I hadn't. The stars were moving. Not twinkling, actually moving, rearranging themselves into new patterns. And between them I could see something vast and dark, something with too many legs, spinning a web of light between the mountains. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sarah whispered. "It showed me other worlds, other harvests. We're not the first, Ranger Thornfield. We won't be the last." I reached for my radio, but Sarah moved faster than any human should be able to move. Her hand clamped down on my wrist with crushing strength. "It doesn't want you to call for help," she said, still smiling that terrible smile. "It wants you to watch. It wants you to remember what you saw 13 years ago." "Sarah, this isn't you talking. Something's controlling you." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, I'm still me. I'm just more now. It showed me the truth about the universe, about what we really are. We're food, Ranger Thornfield. Spiritual food for something much greater than ourselves." I pulled my wrist free and backed away, but Sarah didn't follow. She just stood there, arms outstretched to the sky, as if she was trying to hug the stars themselves. "It's almost time," she called after me. "The alignment is nearly complete. All the preparations are finished. Tonight, the harvester comes home." I ran back to my truck, hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The engine turned over on the third try, and I drove as fast as I dared down the winding mountain road. But every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I could see Sarah still standing in that clearing, silhouetted against stars that continued to move across the sky in patterns that hurt to think about. At the ranger station, I tried every phone and radio I could find. Nothing worked. Even my cell phone showed no signal, which was impossible at this elevation. It was like something was blocking all communication in and out of the mountain. I was starting to understand. The reports from the other mountains weren't random incidents. They were preparations. Blackwater Falls had been about testing memory manipulation. Seneca Rocks was about arranging physical matter in specific patterns. New River Gorge was flesh collection. Spruce Knob was consciousness harvesting. Each mountain had provided a different component, and now they were all being drawn here, to Mount Rogers, to the highest point in Virginia. I loaded my truck with emergency supplies, water, food, flares, anything that might help. As I prepared to drive back up the mountain, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Singing. Dozens of voices joined together in perfect harmony, coming from the direction of the summit. But the melody wasn't any hymn I'd ever heard. It was older than that, Stranger than that. It sounded like the kind of song you might hear between the stars. Through my binoculars, I could see lights moving up the mountain trails, not flashlights. These lights pulsed and shifted colors, like they were alive. And they were all heading toward the same place, the summit. Where 13 years ago, something had shown me the truth about what lurks in the spaces between worlds. I got back in my truck and started driving up the mountain. Someone had to witness this. Someone had to survive to tell the story. Even if that someone was a broken ex-priest who'd lost his faith to something wearing the face of an angel. The higher I climbed, the more people I found. But they weren't really people anymore. They came from all directions, walking in perfect straight lines through the forest, ignoring trails and obstacles. Men, women, children, elderly hikers. Dozens of them, all moving with that same too-smooth grace I'd seen in Sarah. Their eyes reflected my headlights like animals' eyes. But the intelligence behind them wasn't human anymore. I stopped the truck near the halfway point and watched through my binoculars as the procession continued. They weren't just locals. Some wore clothes I recognized from the other mountains. A Blackwater Falls t-shirt here, a Seneca Rocks climbing harness there. The thing had been collecting people from across the Appalachians, drawing them all here for whatever was about to happen. That's when I saw him. Marcus Webb, a fellow ranger from Shenandoah. I'd known Marcus for 8 years. He had 3 kids and coached Little League baseball. Now he walked through the forest in torn clothes, his Shenandoah patch hanging loose from his shirt, his eyes glowing with that same terrible light. I got out of the truck and called to him. "Marcus! Marcus! It's Gabriel!" He stopped and turned toward me. When he smiled, I could see that something had carved symbols into his teeth. "Gabriel," he said in a voice that echoed strangely in the mountain air. "You're just in time for the awakening. It's magnificent. It showed us where we really come from. Marcus, this isn't real. Something's controlling you." "Real?" Marcus laughed, and the sound made birds fall silent for miles around. "What's real, Gabriel? The little lives we thought we were living? The small concerns, the small fears, or this?" He gestured to the sky where the stars continued their impossible dance. "It opened our minds, Gabriel. Showed us the true scale of existence. We're part of something so much larger now." Behind Marcus, more people emerged from the trees. I recognized some of them from missing person reports that had crossed my desk over the years. People who'd vanished without a trace in the mountains. People everyone assumed had fallen into ravines or gotten lost in the wilderness. They'd been collected, preserved, prepared. "You saw it before," Marcus continued, taking a step closer. 13 years ago. It tried to show you the truth then, but you ran away. You hid behind your little job, your little routines. But it never forgot you, Gabriel. It's been waiting for you to come back. I backed toward my truck, but more figures emerged from the forest on both sides of the road. They moved to surround me, but slowly, like they had all the time in the world. "Where are you taking them?" I demanded. "To the summit," Marcus said. "To the convergence point. When the stars align properly, the barrier between dimensions grows thin. Thin enough for it to fully manifest. Thin enough for the real harvest to begin." "Harvest of what?" Marcus's smile grew wider, and I could see more symbols carved into the inside of his mouth. "Souls, Gabriel. Consciousness. The spark of awareness that makes us more than meat. It feeds on that spark, grows stronger with each one it consumes. And Earth..." He paused, his head tilting at that same impossible angle. "Earth has so many sparks. Billions of them." The circle was closing around me. I could see children in the group now, their small faces wearing expressions of ancient wisdom that no child should possess. They moved with the same purpose as the adults, their mouths moving in silent unison, speaking words and languages that predated human speech. I broke and ran for the truck, but my keys were gone. Frantically searching my pockets, I looked up to see Sarah Chi, and standing by the driver's door, my keys dangling from her finger. "You can't stop this, Gabriel," she said gently. "But you can be part of it. It remembers your faith, your devotion. It could use someone like you." "My faith was in God," I said, "not in some cosmic parasite." Sarah's expression shifted, becoming almost sad. Your God never answered your prayers, did he? Never showed you miracles, never gave you proof of his love. But this, she gestured to the glowing figures surrounding us. This is real. This is happening. This is divine power you can actually see and touch. She was right, and that was the most terrifying part. 13 years ago, I'd prayed for a sign from God and gotten something much more definite than I'd bargained for. Now, watching dozens of people march willingly toward their spiritual destruction, I realized the universe was far stranger and more terrible than any religion had ever taught. The crowd began moving again, flowing around my truck like water around a stone. They were heading up the mountain, toward the summit, toward whatever was waiting there with its web of starlight and shadow. I had two choices: follow them and face the thing that had shattered my faith 13 years ago, or stay here and wait for it to finish whatever it was planning. Either way, I was probably going to die tonight. But at least if I followed them, I might understand why. The summit of Mount Rogers had been transformed. Where once there'd been a simple cleared area with a few radio towers, now there was something that hurt to look at directly. The air itself seemed to bend and twist around a point about 20 feet above the highest rock outcropping. Stars hung impossibly low, their light forming geometric patterns that made my eyes water and my brain ache. And in the center of it all, it was manifesting. I'd hidden behind the trees at the edge of the clearing, watching as hundreds of people arranged themselves in perfect spirals around the base of the mountain's peak. They stood in absolute silence, their faces turned upward, their mouths moving in soundless prayer to something that definitely wasn't God. The thing coming through the dimensional tear was massive beyond comprehension. I could only see parts of it. A leg here, thick as a redwood tree and covered in what looked like star-filled scales. A section of body there, pulsing with internal light that shifted through colors I didn't have names for. But even these glimpses were enough to make me understand why my mind had blocked out most of my encounter 13 years ago. This wasn't just an alien creature. This was something that existed partially in our reality and partially in the space between stars, something that had been feeding on worlds for longer than human civilization had existed. Marcus Webb stood at the front of the crowd, his arms raised toward the manifestation. When he spoke, his voice carried impossibly far, reaching every person on the mountain. "Harvester of worlds," he called out, "we offer ourselves as willing vessels. Take our consciousness, our souls, our very essence, and add it to your infinite collection. Let us become part of something greater than the brief, meaningless existence we knew as humans." The response came not as sound, but as something that bypassed my ears entirely and spoke directly to my brain. It was the voice of something ancient and patient and utterly alien. Gabriel Thornfield, former priest, guardian of the peak. You have returned. I stepped out from behind the trees. There was no point in hiding anymore. "I remember you," I said, my voice sounding small and fragile in the mountain air. 13 years ago, you tried to recruit me then. I offered you truth. You chose ignorance. Now the cycle completes whether you choose or not. Around the clearing, the assembled people began to glow from within. Their skin became translucent, and I could see light, their souls, their consciousness, beginning to separate from their bodies and drift upward toward the creature above. "Why?" I asked. "Why harvest souls? Why destroy entire worlds? Consciousness is the rarest substance in the universe. Most matter is dead, empty, purposeless. But awareness, thought, the spark of self, these are precious beyond measure. I collect them, preserve them, give them eternal purpose as part of my greater being." "That's not preservation," I said. "That's consumption. You're a predator." "I am evolution. I am the next step." These separate, isolated consciousnesses suffer in their loneliness, their fear, their brief existence. As part of me, they become immortal, connected, purposeful. I watched as Sarah Chen's soul, a bright, Sarah-shaped outline of pure light, separated completely from her body, and joined the stream of consciousness flowing upward. Her empty body collapsed to the ground like a discarded puppet. "You're killing them," I said. "I am freeing them. Observe." Suddenly I could hear them, all the souls it had collected, not just from tonight, but from hundreds of worlds across thousands of years. Their voices filled my mind, and to my horror, they weren't screaming. They were singing, praising, grateful. They told me about the peace of unity, the joy of being part of something vast and eternal. They spoke of knowledge beyond anything they'd possessed as individuals, of love beyond human understanding, of purpose that stretched across galaxies, and they begged me to join them. "No," I said, backing away as more and more souls joined the stream flowing into the creature above. "This is wrong. People should have the choice to live their own lives, make their own mistakes, find their own purpose. Even if that choice leads to suffering, to loneliness, to death." "Yes," I said, "even then." The flow of souls suddenly stopped. The creature's attention focused on me like the weight of a mountain settling on my shoulders. "You interest me, Gabriel Thornfield. Most resist from fear. You resist from principle. Perhaps you would make a suitable herald." Herald. Each world requires preparation. Someone to study the dominant species, to understand their nature, to guide the harvest. I offer you immortality, knowledge, purpose. Help me harvest this world efficiently, and I will make you my voice for the next. I looked around the clearing at the hundreds of empty bodies, at the stream of souls flowing upward like reverse rain, at the thing that wore divinity like a mask while consuming everything I'd ever sworn to protect. "I have a counteroffer," I said, and then I began to pray. Not the kind of prayer I'd learned in seminary, not the Latin phrases or formal invocations. This was the prayer of 13 years of guilt, of a man who'd seen the face of something he'd mistaken for God and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for that moment of cosmic terror. I prayed with words I'd learned from Cherokee elders who'd shared stories around campfires. I prayed with half-remembered phrases from the thing's own victims, words I'd heard in the voices of the consumed souls. I prayed with the desperate honesty of someone who'd lost his faith once and found something harder to hold on to: hope. The harvester's attention pressed down on me like the weight of every star in the sky, but I kept praying. I remembered every person I'd helped in 13 years as a ranger: lost hikers guided to safety, injured climbers pulled from impossible places, frightened children reunited with families. Each memory became part of the prayer, each act of human kindness a word in a language older than the creature above. "What do you think this will accomplish?" "I don't know," I admitted, still praying. "But you said consciousness is precious. You said awareness is rare. If that's true, then every individual mind you consume represents a unique universe of experience that can never be replaced." "Yes, that is why I preserve them." "You don't reserve them, you absorb them. They become part of you, but they stop being themselves." I could feel the prayer taking shape around me, not as light or energy, but as something more, fundamental. "And you're afraid." The pressure of the creature's attention doubled, tripled. I could feel it trying to crush my consciousness, to add my voice to the chorus of grateful souls. "I fear nothing." "You fear extinction. That's why you harvest. You're not some cosmic god. You're a parasite, and every world you consume makes you a little more afraid that someday you'll run out of food." The stream of souls flickered and slowed. For the first time since it had begun manifesting, the harvester seemed uncertain. "You understand nothing of existence on my scale." "I understand enough." The prayer was almost complete now, a web of human experience and stubborn hope that I was weaving around the creature's manifestation point. "You need fear to feed. You need despair and submission. But what if people chose not to be afraid?" Around the clearing, some of the empty bodies were stirring. The souls that hadn't yet been fully absorbed were fighting back, pulling away from the creature's call. "Impossible. You said it yourself. Consciousness is precious. Awareness is rare. That means it's also powerful. I stepped forward, my prayer becoming a declaration. I'm not offering you my soul. I'm not offering you anyone's soul. I'm standing here, on the highest point in Virginia, and I'm telling you to leave. The thing above writhed, its partial manifestation becoming more visible as it struggled against whatever force my prayer was generating. I could see it now, not just the legs and body segments, but something like a face made of swirling galaxies and dying stars. You cannot banish me. I am eternal. Maybe, but you're not welcome here. The Cherokee had stories about Mount Rogers, about why it was the highest peak in the region. They said it was a place where the earth reached up to touch the sky, where the boundary between worlds was thin. But they also said it was protected, that certain things could never fully enter our world as long as people remembered the old words and the old ways. My prayer had become one of those old ways. The harvester's manifestation began to collapse inward, the dimensional tear sealing itself like a healing wound. The creature's voice echoed in my mind one last time. I will remember you, Gabriel Thornfield. When I return in 500 years, I will remember. And then it was gone. The sudden silence was deafening. Around the clearing, people were sitting up, confused and disoriented, but alive. Their souls had snapped back into their bodies like rubber bands, and most of them seemed to have no memory of what had just happened. But I remembered everything. As dawn broke over Mount Rogers, I helped the survivors make their way down the mountain. I filed reports that no one would believe, made phone calls that were quietly buried, and sent warnings to archives that would probably never be opened. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter that I sealed and dated for the year 2489. I sent copies to the Vatican, to the Smithsonian, to Cherokee tribal leaders, and to the Park Service archives. Somewhere, someone would remember when the stars started moving again. The mountain was quiet now. The birds had returned, the insects were singing, and the wind blew like it was supposed to. But sometimes, on the clearest nights, I still climbed to the summit and watched the stars, just to make sure they stayed where they belonged. My name is Gabriel Thornfield, and I've been keeping watch on Mount Rogers for 13 years. In 487 more years, something will try to come back. When it does, I hope someone remembers this story. I hope they remember that consciousness is precious, that awareness is rare, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be afraid, even if you're just one broken ex-priest standing on a mountain, telling the universe, no. Sometimes that's enough. My name is David Holloway, and I need to tell you what happened at the radio tower station in George Washington National Forest. People say I'm crazy. The doctors keep changing my pills. But I know what I saw, and I know what's still out there. I've been a park ranger for 7 years, good at my job, even if I see things others don't. My mind works differently, always has. I notice small details, remember conversations exactly as they happened. Sometimes I think people are plotting against me when they're just being normal. The doctors call it paranoid personality disorder. I call it being careful. The radio station sits 40 miles from the nearest town, deep in Virginia's mountains. 6 of us work there, keeping the emergency communications running for the whole forest. It's lonely work, but I like it. Fewer people to worry about. Bill Morrison had been my partner for 3 years. Big guy, always drinking coffee, 10 cups a day, easy. He'd joke that coffee was the only thing keeping him human. Susan Walsh worked the evening shift, right-handed, with this snorting laugh when something was really funny. Chief Kane ran the place with an iron fist but fair rules. Mary Silverton was the youngest, always humming old folk songs. We were like family. Until the spring floods came, the road washed out on a Tuesday morning in April. Chief Kane said it would be 2 weeks before they could fix it. No big deal. We had supplies, and the radio kept us connected to the outside world. That's when Bill came back from his morning patrol. "Morning, Dave," he said, same as always. But something felt wrong. I watched him walk to the kitchen. He opened the cabinet and pulled out a tea bag. Tea. Bill Morrison, who lived on coffee, who once said tea was leaf water for weaklings, was making tea. "You feeling okay, Bill?" I asked. He looked at me funny. "Why wouldn't I be?" "You're drinking tea." "I always drink tea in the morning, you know that." But I didn't know that. I knew Bill better than anyone. Coffee first thing, then coffee with breakfast, then coffee every hour until bedtime. I'd been watching him do it for 3 years. "What about coffee?" I pressed. Bill wrinkled his nose. "Coffee? That stuff tastes terrible. Can't stand it." The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Bill stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. Maybe my medication needed adjusting again. But I knew what I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Bill's face when he said coffee tasted terrible. It was his face, his voice, his body. But the expression was all wrong, like someone wearing a Bill mask who'd never met the real Bill. I started a notebook. Small things at first. The way Bill held his fork, left hand instead of right. How he called his wife honey on the radio instead of buttercup like he had for 15 years. The way he walked, same stride, but his left foot turned out slightly different. Nobody else noticed. When I mentioned it to Susan, she laughed. "Dave, you're seeing things that aren't there again. Bill's fine. Maybe you should call your doctor." But I knew I wasn't seeing things. I was seeing them clearly for the first time. 3 days after Bill changed, Susan Walsh didn't come back from her evening patrol. We searched all night with flashlights and radios. Chief Kane was furious. Susan never missed check-ins, never went off-route. At dawn, we found her walking back to the station like nothing had happened. "Where were you?" Kane demanded. Susan smiled. "What do you mean? I finished my patrol and went to bed." "You never radioed in?" "Sure I did. At 11 sharp, just like always. But we'd been trying to reach her since 10:30. I checked the radio logs. No transmiss. Cyan from Susan after 9:45. That's when I noticed she was writing with her left hand. Susan Walsh was right-handed. I'd watched her fill out reports for 2 years, always, complaining about smudged ink because she was a righty writing with cheap pens. Now she was signing forms with her left hand, smooth and natural. "Susan," I said carefully, "you're writing with the wrong hand." She looked down at her hand holding the pen, then back at me. For just a second, her face went completely blank, like she was processing something. "I'm left-handed, Dave. I've always been left-handed." "No, you're not. You're right-handed. You complain about pen smudges all the time." "I think you're confused." Her voice was patient, like she was talking to a child. "Maybe you should rest." That afternoon, Susan laughed at something Chief Kane said. It was a normal laugh, pleasant, musical. But Susan's real laugh was this awful snorting sound that made everyone smile because it was so ridiculous. I'd never heard Susan laugh like a normal person. Ever. I cornered Bill in the supply room. "Something's wrong with Susan." "What do you mean?" "She's different. Writing with the wrong hand, laughing differently. Just like you started drinking tea instead of coffee." Bill's face darkened. "Dave, you need to stop this. There's nothing wrong with me or Susan. You're having one of your episodes." "I'm not having an episode. I know what I'm seeing." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a guy who's been off his medication too long, making up conspiracies about his friends." The words hit like a punch. Bill had never talked to me like that. The real Bill understood my condition, never used it against me. He'd cover for me when I had bad days, help me stay grounded. This thing wearing Bill's face was cruel in a way Bill had never been. That night, I checked my medication bottles. The pills looked right, but something felt off. I'd been taking them for years. I knew exactly how they made me feel. These pills felt different, stronger, making me dizzy and confused. I stopped taking them. Within 2 days, my head cleared completely. The paranoid thoughts that had been fuzzing my thinking were gone. I could see clearly again. And what I saw terrified me. Bill and Susan were watching me. All the time. When I looked up from my work, one of them was always staring. When I walked to the bathroom, they tracked my movement. When I ate, they observed every bite. They weren't my friends anymore. I didn't know what they were. But I knew the real Bill and Susan were gone. Chief Kane disappeared on a Friday night. I was working late in the radio room when I heard his truck start up. Strange. Kane never drove alone after dark, and he'd been complaining about engine trouble all week. I watched through the window as the headlights disappeared into the forest. Kane came back Saturday morning, but he wasn't Kane anymore. The real Kane was a stickler for regulations. Uniform pressed, boots polished, everything by the book. This Kane's shirt was wrinkled, his boots were muddy, and he couldn't remember the morning inspection routine he'd done every day for 8 years. "Chief," I said during the noon briefing, "you forgot to check the generator logs." He stared at me blankly. "The what logs?" "Generator logs. You check them every morning at 0700. Of course, the generator logs." He fumbled with his clipboard. "Right, those." But he didn't know where the generator logs were kept. Chief Kane, who could navigate this station blindfolded, spent 5 minutes looking for a logbook that was always kept in the same desk drawer. That night, I heard voices in the basement. I'd lived in this station for 3 years. I knew every sound, the way the building settled, how the wind moved through the walls, where the pipes knocked. These were new sounds. Voices, but muffled and strange. I crept downstairs with a flashlight. The basement was supposed to be empty except for storage and the backup generator. Instead, I found a door I'd never seen before. It was old wood, painted over so many times the surface was smooth. Thick metal lock hung from the handle. I could hear the voices more clearly now. Weak, desperate sounds. "Help, please. Someone help us." I knew that voice. It was Bill Morrison. The real Bill Morrison. My hands shook as I worked on the lock with a screwdriver. It took 20 minutes to break it open. Behind the door was a narrow room like a root cellar. 3 people lay on dirty mattresses, barely alive. Bill Morrison, gray and thin, his coffee-stained uniform hanging loose on his shrinking frame. Susan Walsh, her right hand cuffed to a pipe, pen marks covering her fingers from trying to write. Chief Kane, unconscious, his polished boots now cracked and faded. They were all there. The real ones. Alive, but dying. "Dave?" Bill's voice was a whisper. "Is that really you?" "Oh God, Bill, what happened? Who did this?" It copies us," Susan said, her snorting laugh now just a wheeze. "Takes everything. Memories, voice, face. But it keeps us alive to check details." "Where is it now?" "Upstairs," Kane mumbled, barely conscious. "It's all of us now, walking around, living our lives. We have to get you out of here." "No!" Bill grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "It knows when we're missing. If we're gone too long, it'll know you found us." "Then what do I do?" "It's not perfect," Susan said. "Can't copy recent memories right away. Takes time to process new information. If you ask about something that just happened, something only the real person would know. It gets confused," Bill finished. "Tries to guess. That's when you can tell." Footsteps upstairs. Someone walking toward the basement door. "Go," Kane whispered, "before it finds you here." I ran. Up the stairs into the main hallway, trying to look casual as fake Kane walked toward me. "Dave? What are you doing down there?" "Checking the generator. Heard some noise." "Everything okay?" "Fins. All fine." But I could see him studying my face, looking for signs that I knew. The thing wearing Kane's body was smart, careful, and now it knew I was getting suspicious. The next morning, Mary Silverton went out to check the weather station and never came back. I found her 3 hours later, walking up from the forest with dirt under her nails and leaves in her hair. "Where were you, Mary?" "Weather station, like always." "Why?" "That was 3 hours ago." "No, it wasn't. I just got back. But Mary had always been precise about time. She wore 3 watches and synchronized them every morning. The Mary I knew would never lose track of 3 hours. I waited until evening, then tested her. Mary, what song were you humming yesterday morning? Song? She looked confused. You always hum. Folk songs. Yesterday it was... What was it? The fake Mary's face went blank for several seconds. Processing. Searching through copied memories for the right answer. Greensleeves? Wrong. Yesterday morning, the real Mary had been humming Barbara Allen. I remembered because she'd hummed it 5 times in a row and I'd asked her to stop. Now there were 4 of them. 4 perfect copies walking around, pretending to be my friends. And I was completely alone. I barricaded myself in the radio room that night, pushed a desk against the door, unplugged the phone, and tried to call for help on the emergency frequency. But every time I transmitted, one of the fake rangers would knock on the door. Dave, you okay in there? Just working late. Mind if we come in? Actually, yes, I mind. The knocking stopped, but I could hear them out there whispering, planning. I grabbed a pen and paper, started writing down everything I knew. If something happened to me, maybe someone would find it and understand. But as I wrote, a terrible thought crept into my head. What if I was wrong? What if the stress and isolation had finally broken my mind completely? What if I'd stopped taking my medication and now I was seeing conspiracies where none existed? What if my friends were just being themselves and I was the one who'd changed? I looked at my reflection in the radio room window. Same face, same eyes. But was I really Dave Holloway? Or was I another copy, programmed to think I was the real one? The thought made me sick. A soft knock interrupted my spiral. Dave? It was Mary's voice. Sweet, concerned. We're worried about you. You've been acting strange. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're having an episode. We want to help. Through the window, I could see all 4 of them standing outside. Bill, Susan, Kane, and Mary. They looked exactly like my friends. Concerned, caring faces. Let us in, Dave. We can work through this together. For a moment, I almost believed them. Almost opened the door and apologized for being paranoid. Almost let them help me. Then I remembered the real Bill, dying in the basement, warning me about the copies. What was Bill drinking when I first got suspicious? I called out. Silence. Come on, Bill, easy question. What was I upset about 3 days ago? Coffee, fake Bill finally said. You were upset that I was drinking coffee. Wrong. I was upset because he'd stopped drinking coffee and switched to tea. Susan, what hand do you write with? Right hand, of course. Wrong again. The fake Susan was left-handed now. Chief Kane, what time do you do morning inspections? 0800. Wrong. Kane did inspections at 0700. Had for 8 years. They were all wrong. Every answer was slightly off, like they were guessing based on incomplete information. The knocking stopped. When I looked out the window, they were gone. But I could hear new sounds from the basement, dragging, scraping, the muffled voices of the real rangers calling for help. I had to do something. The copies were moving the originals, probably because they knew I'd found them. I grabbed a fire axe from the emergency cabinet and crawled up toward the basement. The station was dark, silent except for the sounds below. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw them. The 4 copies stood around the hidden room, dragging out the real rangers. Bill, Susan, Kane, and Mary, the originals, were barely conscious, gray and withered like old fruit. But as I watched, something impossible happened. The fake rangers began to change. Their faces melted and shifted, flowing like liquid. For a moment I saw their true form, a mass of writhing flesh with human faces floating just beneath the surface like drowned corpses. Then they snapped back to human shape. "Hello, Dave," they said in unison, their voices perfectly synchronized. "We've been waiting for you." The thing that had been Bill stepped forward. "We know you found them. Know you've been testing us." "What are you?" "We're better versions. Improved. Your friends were so limited, so weak. We've taken their best parts and made them perfect. The Susan thing smiled. No more paranoid episodes, Dave. No more medication. We can copy you too. Make you better. What about them? I pointed to the real Rangers. We need them for reference. Memory banks. But they're dying anyway. Won't last much longer. The real Bill looked at me with hollow eyes. Dave. Run. I raised the fire axe. The copies moved fast, faster than humans should move, but I was already swinging. The axe caught fake Bill in the chest. Instead of blood, thick black liquid poured out. The thing screamed, and its face began melting again. The other copies rushed me. I swung wildly, catching fake Susan in the shoulder. More black liquid, more screaming. The generator! The real Kane was trying to shout. Gas line! Break the gas line! I understood. The basement had a natural gas line running to the backup generator. If I could break it, create a spark, I ran for the generator room with the copies. It was chasing me. They moved wrong now, their human disguises slipping. I could see extra limbs, faces that didn't belong, eyes in places eyes shouldn't be. The axe bit into the gas line. I smelled propane immediately. You can't kill us, the copies said. We'll just make new forms, better forms. Maybe, I said, raising the axe over the generator's electrical panel. But I can try. The axe came down. Sparks flew. The explosion threw me against the wall. Fire raced up the gas line into the basement, consuming everything. I heard the copies screaming, not human screams, but something else, something that had never been human. The real Rangers were screaming too. I tried to reach them, but the fire was too hot, too fast. The ceiling began to collapse. I ran. The fire department found me 3 miles down the mountain road, walking toward town in my underwear and smoke-stained socks. I told them about the gas leak, the explosion. Didn't mention the copies or the real Rangers in the basement. Who would believe that? They found 4 bodies in the ruins. Bill Morrison, Susan Walsh, Robert Kane, and Mary Silverton. Burned beyond recognition, but the dental records matched. I was the only survivor. The investigation concluded that a gas leak had caused the explosion. Faulty equipment, poor maintenance. The department settled with the families quietly. I got a medical discharge. Post-traumatic stress, they said. Survivor's guilt. They gave me new medication and sent me to therapy. For 6 months, I almost believed their version. Maybe there had been no copies. Maybe my paranoid mind had created the whole thing during a psychotic break. Maybe I'd somehow caused the explosion myself and blocked out the memory. Maybe my friends really had died in an accident, and I was just a crazy man who'd convinced himself of an impossible story. But then I went to Bill Morrison's funeral. His wife Nancy was there, crying over the casket. I offered my condolences. Thank you, Dave. Bill talked about you all the time, said you were his best friend. He was mine too. Hilma, it's your morning coffee talks. I stared at her. Coffee talks? You know, how you two would drink coffee every morning and discuss the day's work. Bill said you made the best coffee in the station. But I never drank coffee with Bill. I hated coffee. Bill knew that. Bill's wife was remembering conversations that never happened. I started paying attention after that, listening to how people talked about my dead friends. Susan's family remembered her as left-handed. They'd always remembered her as left-handed. Kane's wife said he'd always done his morning inspections at 0800, not 0700. Mary's sister swore Mary had never hummed folk songs, said she'd always been tone-deaf. Everyone's memories had changed. The copies had somehow replaced not just my friends, but everyone's memories of my friends. Or maybe the copies had been there longer than I thought. Maybe they'd been slowly replacing people for months, years even. Maybe the real Bill, Susan, Kane, and Mary had been gone long before I noticed the changes. I moved to a different state, got a job in a hardware store, kept to myself, stayed on my medication, went to therapy, acted normal. But I kept watching, kept noticing. The customer who always bought Phillips head screws but suddenly preferred flathead. The mailman who'd been left-handed for 3 years but started using his right hand to sort letters. The neighbor who used to hate dogs but started feeding strays. Small changes. The kind only someone like me would notice. My name is David Holloway, and I'm telling you this because I don't think the thing at the radio station was alone. I think they're everywhere, and I think they're still spreading. If someone you know changes in small ways, different habits, altered preferences, slightly wrong memories, pay attention. It might be nothing, or it might be too late. Trust me, I know the difference, even if nobody believes me. My name is Elena Nighthawk, and I've been a park ranger at Shenandoah for 3 years now. Before this job, I spent 4 years in the Army as a sniper. My grandmother always said our Lakota blood would keep me safe in the wild places, but she never told me what to do when the wild places start hunting back. It was November 1973, and the mountain was getting ready for winter. The leaves had fallen weeks ago, leaving the trees bare and black against the gray sky. I loved this time of year. Everything was quiet, peaceful. Most tourists had gone home, and it was just me in the mountain. That morning started normal enough. I was checking on the old fire tower when I smelled something wrong. Not just wrong, terrible, like meat left out in the sun for days. The smell was coming from Devil's Creek about a mile down the trail. I followed my nose through the woods, stepping careful on the wet leaves. The smell got stronger with every step. When I finally found where it was coming from, I wished I hadn't. There were 5 tents set up in a circle around a cold fire pit, but the tents were torn apart like something big had ripped through them with claws. Sleeping bags were scattered everywhere, covered in dark stains. And the smell. God, the smell was awful. I found the first body near the creek. It was a man, maybe 40 years old, wearing hunting clothes. But he hadn't been killed by any animal I knew. His body was twisted wrong, like something had played with him before finishing the job. There were bite marks, but they were too big to be from a bear or wolf. I found 4 more bodies scattered around the camp, all hunters, all killed the same way. Their rifles were still in their tents, unfired. Whatever got them had been fast and quiet. I'd seen death before in the Army, but this was different. This felt personal, like something had enjoyed killing these men. The worst part was the tracks. I'm good at reading sign, it was part of my job. But these tracks didn't make sense. They looked like wolf prints, but bigger, much bigger. And sometimes they just stopped, like whatever made them had learned to fly. I radioed back to headquarters, but all I got was static. The storm last night must have knocked out the radio tower. I was alone up here with whatever had done this. That's when I saw it watching me from across the creek. It stood about 8 feet tall and looked like a man, but wrong in every way. Its skin was gray like old leather, and antlers grew from its skull like a twisted crown. It wore things around its neck, teeth and bones that looked human. When it smiled at me, I saw rows of sharp teeth. But the worst part was its eyes. They were smart. This thing wasn't just a wild animal. It knew exactly what it was doing. It pointed one long finger at me, then drew the finger across its throat. The message was clear. You're next. Then it turned and walked into the woods like it owned the place. I stood there for a long time trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to believe I'd imagined it, but the bodies were real. The smell was real. And somewhere out there, something was waiting for me. I got back to my truck as fast as I could without running. Running would make me prey, and I wasn't ready to be prey yet. The drive back to the ranger station felt like it took forever. Every shadow between the trees looked like it might be hiding something. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump. By the time I reached the station, my hands were shaking. I tried the radio again. Still nothing. The phone lines were down too. The storm had cut me off from the outside world completely. I was alone on the mountain with whatever had killed those hunters. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself I'd seen things wrong. Maybe, and it was just a really big bear. Maybe the shadows had played tricks on my eyes. Maybe the stress of finding all those bodies had made me see monsters where there weren't any. But deep down, I knew better. My grandmother had told me stories about the old days, about things that hunted in the deep woods, things that looked like men but weren't, things that got hungry for more than just meat. As the sun started to set, I loaded my rifle and checked my ammunition. I had maybe 30 rounds of regular bullets, plus a box of old silver-tipped ones my grandfather had given me years ago. He'd said they were for special hunting. I'd always thought he meant deer. I was getting ready to head home when I heard the howling start. It wasn't like any wolf I'd ever heard. This sound was deeper, more musical. And there wasn't just one voice. There were many, all singing together in the dark. The sound echoed off the mountains until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then I realized they were getting closer. I grabbed my rifle and stepped outside. The howling stopped the moment my feet hit the porch, like they knew I was listening. The woods were dead quiet now. Even the insects had gone silent. Something moved in the tree line. Then something else. I counted at least 6 shapes moving between the trees, but they stayed in the shadows where I couldn't see them clearly. "I know you're there," I called out. My voice sounded small in the darkness. One of them stepped into the moonlight. It looked like a man, but its arms were too long and its fingers ended in claws. It tilted its head at me like a curious dog. "You killed those hunters," I said, raising my rifle. The thing smiled and nodded. Then it opened its mouth and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "They were practice. You are the real hunt." Before I could shoot, it melted back into the shadows. The howling started again, but now it was moving. They were circling the station, staying just out of sight. I backed toward the door, keeping my rifle up. Something scratched at the roof above me. Something else, too. Instead, the windows on the far side of the building. They were testing my defenses, learning the layout, just like soldiers would do. I made it inside and locked the door, then went around checking all the windows. The scratching and tapping continued all night, but they never tried to break in. They were just letting me know they were there, letting me know they could get in whenever they wanted. Around dawn, the sound stopped. I looked out the window and saw tracks in the mud around the building. The same impossible wolf prints I'd found at the massacre site. But now, there were human footprints too, leading away into the woods. Mixed in with the tracks, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a note, written on bark with what looked like blood. 48 hours. Then we hunt. I was looking at the note when I heard a scream from across the valley. High and terrified, but cut short. Someone else was up here. Someone else had just died. The hunt had begun. I spent the morning preparing for war. I moved ammunition to different hiding spots around the station. I barricaded the windows and reinforced the doors. I even rigged up some simple traps using equipment from the maintenance shed. But I couldn't stay locked up forever. That scream had come from the direction of the old campground, and there might be survivors who needed help. Against my better judgment, I had to go look. I loaded my pack with medical supplies and extra ammunition, then headed out into the woods. The silver-tipped bullets went into my rifle. If my grandfather's stories were true, I was going to need them. The forest felt wrong. The birds weren't singing and the squirrels weren't chattering. Even the trees seemed to lean away from the trail, like they were trying to escape something. I found the source of the scream at Pine Ridge Campground. A family had been camping there. A father, mother, and 2 kids. Their car was still parked at the site, but the camp was destroyed. The father was dead. I found him hanging from a tree, his body marked with the same brutal wounds as the Teitsa hunters. But this time was different. This time, they'd left him where his family would see. I heard crying from the woods and found the mother hiding with her children in a small cave. She was in shock, barely able to speak. The kids were maybe 8 and 10 years old, both crying quietly. "It took him," she whispered when she saw me. "Right in front of us. It took him and we couldn't do anything." I got them calmed down and started thinking about how to get them to safety. But as we prepared to leave the cave, I heard something that made my heart stop. Howling. Close by. "Stay quiet," I whispered to the family. "Don't make a sound." Through the cave opening, I could see shapes moving between the trees. They weren't trying to hide anymore. There were 12 of them, all different, but all wrong. Some looked like twisted people. Others moved like wolves but stood upright. Their leader was the antlered thing I'd seen at the creek. It called out in that grinding voice, "Ranger Nighthawk, we have a proposal." I didn't answer, but it continued anyway. "Give yourself to us willingly, and we will let the family go. Refuse, and we will hunt them all. Children make such interesting sounds when they're afraid." The mother grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with terror. The kids pressed closer to her, trying to become invisible. "You have 1 hour to decide," the creature said. "We will be watching." Then they faded back into the woods, but I could feel them out there, waiting. The mother looked at me with desperate eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them hurt my babies." I checked my rifle and counted my ammunition. 31 rounds left, including the silver ones. 12 enemies, maybe more. The math wasn't good, but I'd been a soldier before I was a ranger. I knew something about fighting when the odds were bad. "I'm going to get you out of here," I told the family. "But I need you to do exactly what I say, when I say it. Can you do that?" The mother nodded. The kids looked scared, but determined. I led them out of the cave just as the sun started to set. We moved slow and quiet, following deer trails toward the main road. If I could get them to my truck, they might have a chance. We almost made it. The attack came without warning. One of the creatures dropped from a tree right in front of us, its claws aimed at the little girl. I shot it in the chest with a silver bullet, and it went down, screaming. Then they were everywhere. I pushed the family behind a fallen log and started shooting. The regular bullets slowed them down, but only the silver ones actually stopped them. I dropped 2 more before they pulled back into the shadows. "Run!" I shouted to the family. "Get to the road, and don't look back." The mother grabbed her kids and ran. I gave them covering fire, picking off anything that tried to follow. But there were too many of them, and I was running out of silver bullets fast. That's when I heard the little boy scream. One of the creatures had circled around. It had the boy by the leg, dragging him back into the woods. The mother was fighting to reach him, but 2 more creatures blocked her path. I had a choice to make: save the ammunition for myself or use it to save a child. It wasn't really a choice at all. I put my last silver bullet through the creature's head. It let go of the boy and collapsed. The other 2 ran when they saw their packmate die. The family escaped, but now I was alone in the dark with a dozen supernatural killers and no silver bullets left. The leader stepped out from behind a tree, that terrible smile on its face. "Foolish," it said, "but brave. We will enjoy hunting you, Elena Nighthawk. You will make a worthy trophy." I backed away, regular bullets ready. They wouldn't kill these things, but they might slow them down long enough for me to find a better position. "What are you?" I asked, still moving. "We are the Wild Hunt," it replied. "We have chased prey across this continent for 300 years. Warriors, outlaws, heroes. We have taken them all, but you might be the best yet." It gestured to its pack, and they started moving forward. Slow, confident. They knew they had me. "The hunt begins now," the leader said. "Run, little ranger. Make it interesting." So I ran. I ran through the woods like my life depended on it, because it did. Behind me, I could hear them following, not hurrying, just keeping pace. They wanted me to exhaust myself first. I had one advantage. I knew these mountains better than anyone. I'd hiked every trail, climbed every ridge, explored every cave. If I was going to survive, I had to use that knowledge. I led them up toward Hawksbill Summit, the highest peak in the park. The terrain there was all rocks and cliffs, hard to navigate in the dark, but I'd been up there dozens of times. If I could reach the old fire tower, I might have a chance. The climb was brutal. My lungs burned and my legs ached, but I didn't slow down. Every time I looked back, I could see eyes gleaming in the darkness behind me. They were still following, still patient. Halfway up the mountain, I remembered something. There was an old ranger cabin near the summit, abandoned for years. If I was lucky, there might be supplies there, maybe even weapons. I found the cabin just as my strength was giving out. The door was locked, but my boot took care of that. Inside, everything was covered in dust and mouse droppings, but in a back closet, I found what I was looking for. Dynamite. Old mining explosives left over from when they'd built the trails. There were 6 sticks, plus blasting caps and fuse wire, enough to bring down half the mountain if I used it right. I could hear them outside now, testing the walls and windows. The leader's voice drifted through the night. "Clever girl, but you only delay the inevitable." I grabbed the dynamite and headed for the back window. There was a narrow ledge that led around the cabin to the rocky slopes above. If I could rig the explosives right, I might take some of them with me. I made it onto the ledge just as they broke down the front door. Moving as quietly as I could, I planted charges at 3 different spots along the cliff face. The fuses were long enough to give me maybe 2 minutes to get clear. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Voices. Human voices calling for help. Down in the valley, I could see flashlights moving. A search party had come looking for the missing family. They had no idea what they were walking into. The creatures heard them too. Several of the pack peeled away from the cabin, heading down toward the valley, toward innocent people who couldn't defend themselves. I had to make a choice. Use the explosives to save myself or go down and try to warn the searchers. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. A warrior protects others, even at the cost of her own life. I left the charges unlit and started down the mountain. The search party was 5 people with flashlights and radios. They were making enough noise to wake the dead, calling out names and crashing through the underbrush. They might as well have painted targets on their backs. I reached them just as the first creature attacked. It came out of nowhere, a shadow with claws and teeth. I tackled the nearest searcher just as those claws swept through the space where his head had been. "Run!" I screamed. "Get back to your cars!" But it was too late. They were surrounded. The creatures played with them at first, like cats with mice. They'd let one person almost escape, then drag them back. They were enjoying the terror. I emptied my rifle at anything that moved, but regular bullets barely slowed them down. One by one, the searchers fell. I tried to save them, but there were too many creatures and not enough of me. By the time it was over, 3 people were dead, and the other 2 were running for their lives through the woods. I was alone again, and now I was out of ammunition. The pack circled me slowly. Their leader emerged from the shadows, those antlers gleaming in the moonlight. "You cost us some prey," it said, "but you proved your worth. We will make your death memorable." "Before you kill me," I said, trying to buy time, "tell me what you really are." The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I was Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Devers, 15th Virginia Infantry. During the war between your states, my men and I were trapped in these mountains. Winter was coming, and we had no food." Its eyes gleamed with old hunger. "So we ate the dead. Then we ate the wounded, and when they ran out, we ate each other. The mountain spirits found us worthy of a different kind of life. Now we hunt forever, seeking prey that can test our skills." "That was over 100 years ago," I said. "Time means nothing to us. We are eternal and always hungry." It raised one clawed hand. "Enough talk. Time to feed." That's when I smiled. "You know what your problem is?" I said. "You spent so much time hunting me you never noticed where I led you." I pulled out the detonator I'd taken from the cabin. Above us, the charges I'd planted were still waiting. The creature's eyes went wide. "No. My grandfather always said silver kills monsters," I said, "but he never mentioned dynamite." I pushed the button. The mountain exploded. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed with my head wrapped in bandages and my left arm in a cast. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. The rock slide had buried most of the cliff face, and it took the rescue team 6 hours to dig me out. The official report said there had been a gas explosion at an old mining site. Nobody questioned it. Nobody wanted to explain the strange tracks or the destroyed campsite or the way some of the bodies had been found. They transferred me to a desk job in Richmond after I recovered. They said I needed time to heal from the trauma. They were right, but not in the way they thought, because the explosion hadn't killed them all. I found that out a month later when I went back to pack up my things from the ranger station. There were new tracks in the mud around the building, smaller than before, but unmistakably the same shape. Inside my desk, I found another note written on bark. You killed our alpha. The pack remembers. We will be back when the hunt calls again. It was signed with a bloody paw print. I've been in Richmond for 6 months now, pushing papers and trying to forget what happened on Hawksbill Mountain, but I can't forget. Every full moon, I hear howling in my dreams. Every shadow looks like it might be hiding something with claws and teeth. Last week, I got a package in the mail with no return address. Inside were 3 silver bullets and a note from my grandmother. The old spirits told me you would need these. The hunt never truly ends, granddaughter, but neither do the hunters. I keep the bullets in my desk drawer now, next to my service weapon, just in case. Because somewhere out there in the Virginia mountains, something is waiting for the next hunting season to begin. And when it does, I'll be ready. My name is Elena Nighthawk, and I survived the wild hunt. But survival is just the beginning. The mountain remembers everything. And so do I. The end.